Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. As a courtesy to the presenters and your fellow attendees, please silence all mobile devices. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to everyone. The 2023 Inter-Service Industry Training Simulation and Education Conference is now called to order. I'm Elliot Weiner from Iowa State University, and I'm honored this year to have served as your conference chair. To active and retired general and flag officers, members of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, esteemed members of Congress, distinguished guests, representatives of allied nations, exhibitors and attendees from government, industry, and academia. On behalf of the United States Army and the entire conference committee, I welcome you to the world's largest modeling, training, simulation, and education event, Itsec 2023. Joining me on stage is the Army Executive, Ms. Karen Saunders, the Program Executive Officer for Simulation and Training and Instrumentation, PEO STRI. In December 2014, Ms. Saunders culminated a 30-year honorable career in the U.S. Army as a colonel, serving as the Chief of Staff for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. She has had numerous distinguished postings, including Executive Director of the Defense Science Board, the Program Manager for the DoD STEM Development Office, and prior to her current position, she served as the Chief of Staff for the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. In her current role as a Program Executive Officer for Simulation, Training, and Instrumentation, Ms. Saunders oversees a multi-billion-dollar portfolio, leading more than 1,200 military, government civilian, and service support contractors. The organization also manages foreign military sales programs for over 65 countries. It's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Karen Saunders, our lead service executive. We will now post the colors, followed by the national anthem sung by Captain, United States Navy retired, Bill Roto-Rooter, and Commander, United States Navy retired, Hank Phillips, and an invocation offered by Mr. Jesse Citizen. Ms. Saunders, if you would please present the colors. Everyone, please stand.
Post the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please join me in today's invocation. Almighty Father, we gather here from across the globe, united in our purpose to serve and support our operations and warfighters. We are grateful for the opportunity to participate in this year's Inter-Service Industry Training Simulation Education Conference, recognizing that it is not by chance that we are here today. We are thankful and ask blessing for each of the individuals in this room and those traveling to join us for today's Itsec journey. We are thankful for the sacrifices that many have made to be here this week amidst the financial and other global challenges we face. We are humbled by the unwavering dedication of the National Defense Industrial Association, National Training Simulation staff, Itsec Conference and Program Chairs, executive staff, international military, industry, and academia partners, and all those involved in the volunteer subcommittees that ensure the success of Itsec. We are particularly grateful for the leadership of the Army's political, senior executive service, and its military leaders. We pray for continued wisdom for our presidents, the members of Congress, the Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, Space Force, and federal civilians. Dear God, we ask you, as we reflect on today's event, to remember Admiral Jim Robb, President of the NTSA, who passed on November 1st. We thank him for his legacy and dedication to the Itsec mission. We ask you for your protection for those serving here and their families at home and abroad, and those military, industry, and academia members representing the countries attending Itsec. We are thankful for Itsec, one of the largest events that bring together so many remarkable people to do great things. Lord of wisdom, we ask that you work mightily in us today and throughout this week. May this conference be a source of inspiration and motivation, igniting our passion for innovation and excellence. May we leave feeling empowered to make a lasting impact on the world around us. Amen.
Please be seated. So how about that rendition of the national anthem, huh? So I'd like to direct your attention to this year's theme video.
We live in a digital age, a digital world. Our forces fight on land, air, sea, space, and cyber. To maintain the modern edge, our military forces must adapt to an ever-changing digital landscape. Future wars will be won by those who embrace readiness, cutting-edge technologies, training, testing, and operational concepts. Our warfighters will train with the latest in augmented and virtual platforms, using AI that fights like a near-peer adversary, that adapts to changing tactics and strategies. Industry, academia, and the military are building global partnerships to blend approaches and develop competitive and innovative technologies to train and sustain our military forces in the spectrum of conflict within the digital battle space. A space that's dynamic, vast, and moves at record speeds. At the tactical edge, where humans meet machines, our partnerships are enabling the warfighter by creating domains that sharpen skills and advance capabilities across the multi-spectrum battlefield. Immersive training environments, digital force management, offensive and defensive cyber system platforms, and sustainment of global forces. Tomorrow's battle space is here, and our military forces must be ready to ensure our nation's security through sustainment of a global presence in a digital world. The future is here.
So, it's a big room. I'm going to tell you that right now. I'm a little academic. We're not used to this, but I'm going to do my best. A little over 2.5 years ago, the world changed forever. A global event that had previously only been seen in movies, read about in science fiction, became a reality. I know many of us don't even want to think about that time again. I know I don't. But we persevered as a species, as a planet, as a people, and even in this conference, because we ran the conference in 2020 and 2021. And in Itsec 2022, led by Conference Chair Matt Spruill and Program Chair Jim Threlfall, and the lead service United States Air Force, was one of our biggest ever. As I look out over the audience right now, it's inspiring to think of all the challenges this community has overcome. And it gives me certainty that we can tackle the challenges that we have yet to face. But unfortunately, we've been faced with another tough event already. One that none of us never anticipated, the loss of our friend, mentor, and leader, the president of the NTSA, Rear Admiral U.S. Navy retired, James A. Robb. Admiral Robb passed away a little less than 4 weeks ago, a loss that many of us are still struggling to comprehend. In the leadership roles that I've held in the last few years, several times I gave remarks to groups with Admiral Robb in attendance. And for those that knew him, we know there are certain things he approves of and certain things he doesn't. And for those that know me, you know that I sometimes like to push the boundaries a bit. My style would mildly clash with what I'll call Robb's rules, a few of which are, don't keep thanking people over and over again. It's enough already. A little humor is okay, but keep it mostly business, Elliot. We got a schedule to keep. Don't eat during awards presentations. We don't want to hear the clink clink of your silverware. Remember that for Thursday. And when in doubt, listen to Debbie Langelier. She'll always tell you what to do. He'd come up to me after my remarks, and the statement I heard more than once was, you push it pretty close to the line, Elliot, but you never seem to go over it. Well, in that spirit, I'm going to do it again. Because I'd be remiss to not take a few minutes to talk about a man that I consider a mentor and most importantly, a friend. Jim Robb was appointed a midshipman in the Naval Reserve Officers Training Program on 22 September 1969. He was promoted to lieutenant in July 1976. In between deployments, he led the first F-14 section to attend Top Gun and later returned as a Top Gun instructor. And in April 1990, assumed duty as commanding officer of Naval Fighter Weapons School. One amazing feat recorded is that he recovered from a fully developed flat spin, believed to be the only F-14 pilot to ever have done so. Admiral Robb's awards include the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit 4 times, the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal 3 times, Air Medal with numeral 2, the Navy Commendation Medal, and the Navy Achievement Medal. And there are many, many more. His list of accomplishments, accolades, and awards is truly the most impressive I've ever seen. And with all of this, his aviator nickname of Rookie couldn't be more ironic. When Admiral Robb took the job as president of the NTSA, he took on new missions, one that were near and dear to his heart, furthering the training capabilities for our warfighters. He would say over and over how we were the experts, not him, how we were the ones who were going to solve the continual challenges that came up in training and simulation. I don't think any of us actually believed he didn't have expertise in this area. I know I didn't. But we'd all smile, we'd nod along with him as he would say these things. But in truth, he had skills to create a vision for the future of training and simulation that few of us could match. He also had a unique way of executing that vision with steady leadership, amounts of patience that I still can't understand where all that came from, a firm hand when needed, and unwavering support to each and every one of us in this community. However, his most important mission to this community was revealed in something he would say over and over, and that I and my program chair, Dr. Annie Little, really took to heart. And that's how we're not a community, we're a family. As I look around this room to my friends, many of whom I consider my family, it's easy to say he accomplished his mission. All right, I've gone on long enough because I can feel his eyes boring in on me right now saying, enough, move it along, we got to get back to the mission at hand, and that's running this conference, which we will do this week in his honor. Our theme, sustaining a global force in the digital world, couldn't be more relevant this year. It seems technological breakthroughs and the underlying educational, social, and training issues that go with them seem to be occurring almost daily. Advances in extended reality, computational models, learning strategies, team-based curriculums, and acquisition methods are coming fast and furious. And let's not forget about our buddy ChatGPT, doing everything from passing college admissions exams to upending the entertainment industry. I mean, I miss my shows this fall, don't you? Itsec is where it all comes together. The breadth of content offerings this conference is just staggering to me every year. As an academic who has devoted his career to research, attending conferences is a built-in part of my job, and I've gone all over the world and done them, and I can tell you there's no event like this one. We welcome people from around the globe, from hardcore programmers to executives and managers, from warfighters to first responders, from educators to researchers, and everything in between. Other conferences say they have something for everyone. We truly mean it. The program you're going to experience for the next several days is a result of the astounding efforts of 300 volunteers from government, industry, and academia. These volunteers, along with the staff of the NTSA, worked an extraordinary amount of hours over this past year. I thank each and every one of them for their efforts. The team was led by my wonderful program chair, Dr. Annie Little, and they've put together a world-class program with 149 paper sessions, 31 tutorials, 8 professional development workshops, and a staggering 42 special events. For the technology addicted, our show floor is bigger than ever this year, over 200,000 square feet and over 450 companies. The exhibit floor will also house our service booths, the Cyber Pavilion, Serious Games Showcase and Challenge, the ecosystem of learning, and many others. So the Itsec website has all the latest information. We also developed personas this year and sample itineraries if you're new to the conference. In addition, grab the mobile app and it has all the conference content there as well. We'll have a range of activities and events for our future leaders. These include programs for America's teachers and students, our career fair, and student virtual tours. We will honor many individuals this week, starting with our 2023 Itsec Fellow, Dr. James Wall. Being elected Fellow is the highest honor in our community from the NTSA. Congratulations, Dr. Wall. We will honor many scholarships this week as well, starting with our Admiral Fred Lewis Scholarship recipients, followed by our Leonard P. Gollobin Scholarship recipients, and our Barbara McDaniel Undergraduate Scholarship recipients. Get ready for it. All told, we'll be giving out $180,000 this week in scholarships. And lastly, we'll introduce a new award this year, the NTSA Top 10 Under 40, recognizing the best up-and-coming leaders in the M&S community. And of course, for you runners out there, definitely not one of you. There's still time to register for the 5K Wednesday morning. All proceeds benefit the Tunnel to Towers and STEM initiative. So please come out and run, walk, or roll, or just be with me and we'll hand out waters and whatever else they tell me to do. As I wrap up my remarks, I have a challenge for each and every one of you, and that's to be part of the solutions. Many of us live and breathe the challenges our warfighters and first responders face, but many attendees may be here for different reasons. You may be someone just wanting to see the latest uses in XR or machine learning, just walk the exhibit floor to see all the technological advances. Whatever your corner of the world is, I promise you, it can help with our readiness challenges. Our very freedoms rely on maintaining our readiness in this ever-changing digital world, and your accomplishments can help tremendously. So again, be part of the solutions. It's now my honor to recognize a few of the distinguished guests who helped make this conference the premier training, simulation, education conference in the world. Please note the individuals for this morning's senior leader panel will be introduced during that event. For our fireside chat, our moderator, the Honorable Katrina McFarland, PhD, Vice Chair, Army Science Board. And our speakers, the Honorable Douglas R. Bush, Assistant Secretary of the Army, Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, and General Gary M. Brito, Commanding General, U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, TRADOC. And I would ask, we'll hold our applause until I finish all the rest of the names. We have a few to get through here. Our academic keynote speaker, Dr. Doug Bowman, the Frank J. Mayer Professor of Computer Science and Director of the Center for Human-Computer Interaction at Virginia Tech. From NDIA, the Honorable David Norquist, President and Chief Executive Officer, the Honorable Michael Baer, Chairman of the Board, Brigadier General, United States Air Force retired, Guy Walsh, Executive Vice President, and Rear Admiral Fred Lewis, United States Navy retired and former NTSA President. The Army Executive, Ms. Karen Saunders, United States Army Program Executive Officer, Simulation, Training, Instrumentation, and the Army Principal, Ms. Debbie Dawson. The Sea Service Executives, Captain Tim James, Commanding Officer, United States Navy, Naval Air Warfare Center, Training Systems Division, and the Navy Principal, Mr. Kent Gritton. Colonel Marcus Reynolds, United States Marine Corps, Program Manager for Training Systems, Marine Corps Systems Command, and the Marine Corps Principal, Ms. Carol Byers-Bendel. The Air Force Executive, Colonel Matt Ryan, United States Air Force Chief, Simulators Program Office, Air Force Materiel Command, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and the Air Force Principal, Mr. Heath Morton. And from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Greg Knapp, Chief, Strategy and Training, Office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Force Education and Training, and the OSD Principal, Dr. Fred Engel. I am truly humbled to have served as your conference chair this year. This conference, and more importantly, the people in it, all of you, have become such an integral part of my professional and personal life. I look forward to a tremendous conference this week, and again, let me welcome you to Itsec 2023. I now turn things over to Ms. Karen Saunders, our Army Executive.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Elliot. Such great words this morning, and thank you for the tribute to Admiral Robb. I really feel the excitement in the area here in the Orange County Convention Center for Itsec 2023. This is going to be a phenomenal week, and Elliot already talked about the multiple opportunities, so I hope everyone takes advantage of those. On behalf of NTSA, I'd like to join them in welcoming all of our congressional members, our DoD officials, our senior military leaders, representatives from our coalition and partner nations, industry members, academic members, and most especially our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Guardian, and Coast Guardsmen. It is truly an honor to represent the United States Army as the lead service for this year's Itsec. The Army has been a leader in modeling and simulation for many years, and we are definitely doing our part at sustaining a global force in the digital world. The Army's priorities are people, modernization, and readiness. And simulation and training are key components of our overall modernization efforts. I have no doubt this year's conference will provide unlimited opportunities to learn and share information among the variety of stakeholders who are in attendance this week. So we like to think of modernization through agile acquisition as a team sport. And it requires representatives from our requirements community, from our test community, our contracting community, certainly the efforts of our partnership with industry and academia. The open communication between military, industry, and academia that this conference provides fits well into our team sport philosophy. I would encourage you to take full advantage of all the seminars, panels, educational sessions, and social events over the next few days. I think that they will provide extremely beneficial to both you personally as well as to the success of our current and future missions. We live in uncertain times and in an era of great power competition with our adversaries. Army modernization is key to building the Army of 2030 and for designing and planning the Army of 2040 and beyond. So this is where I'm going as the lead service for Itsec. This is where I'm going to make a shameless plug to come visit the Army booth, booth 3235, which we're calling Army Central this year. We have got some great products to show you from both the acquisition side as well as our developmental command. Within the PEO STRI booth, we are highlighting our next generation for Army training, the synthetic training environment. We'll have demonstrators such as the reconfigurable virtual collective trainer. We'll have Stinger and mortars, and of course the persistent cyber training environment, as well as a squad immersive virtual trainer shoot house. So come on down and see us. My team is going to be very happy to show you the portfolio of products that we're building for our Army soldiers today. In addition to that, we'll talk to you about our portfolio of products that we really kind of define in five areas, if you will. The first is institutional training. Second is home station training, combat training centers, sustainment and maintenance, and training alongside our allies and partners. Every soldier in the United States Army uses a PEO STRI testing, training, or threat product or service throughout their military career. So if you can't find us, go to the Service Quad booth and you'll see combat boot prints taking you down to Army Central. So please come by and see us. Can't miss us, 56-foot semi-trailer with a big STRI logo. We look forward to seeing you. And really, we want you to come and see how we are advancing today's training and defeating tomorrow's threats. So as much as I'd like to continue to talk about what the Army and PEO STRI is doing this year and the incredible capabilities we're developing for our soldiers, it is my honor to introduce the members of our Army Fireside keynote speech this morning. I do want to say thank you to Admiral Robb for his mentorship throughout this year. As I was pulling together this fireside chat, I had these great ideas on who we were going to bring in, and luckily, through his tutelage and mentoring, we got some phenomenal participants this year. So as I introduce them, please hold your applause until the end. The first is Honorable Douglas R. Bush. Honorable Bush was confirmed by the United States Senate as the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology on February 9th, 2022. In addition to his role as Army Acquisition Executive, Senior Procurement Executive, and advisor to the Secretary of the Army, Honorable Bush is responsible for managing an Army acquisition workforce of more than 33,000 members. This includes overseeing 12 program executive offices for armaments and ammunition, missiles and space, ground combat systems, intelligence, electronic warfare and sensors, the soldier, and last but not least, simulation, training, and instrumentation. Honorable Bush began his career as an officer in the United States Army and then served as a congressional staff member for almost 19 years, working in a variety of positions in both the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives, including several positions in the House Armed Services Committee. Welcome, Mr. Bush. General Gary M. Brito. General Brito assumed duties as the 18th Commanding General, United States Army Training and Doctrine Command on September 8, 2022. He is responsible for building and sustaining a highly trained, disciplined, and fit Army by acquiring the best people, training the most lethal soldiers, developing the most professional leaders, guiding the Army's culture, and shaping our future force. General Brito's distinguished career includes serving as the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel. He's also served in a variety of command positions and has multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Welcome, sir. The Honorable Katrina McFarland. Our moderator this morning is Honorable McFarland. With over 30 years of government service, which includes almost 25 years serving with the United States Marine Corps, Honorable McFarland is widely recognized as a leading subject matter expert in government procurement. She serves as the Vice Chair of the Army Science Board as well as Director of several industry boards. She is the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition and has served as an acting Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. Welcome, Ms. McFarland. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Honorable Bush, General Brito, and Honorable McFarland.
Thank you. Okay, can you all hear me? What a fabulous crowd. I'm so honored to be here and especially honored to be able to moderate for these esteemed gentlemen and their team of Army going for training and making sure the Army soldiers are ready and supplied. I'm going to echo for a moment the earlier discussion about Admiral Jim Robb. What a loss. I understand some of his family will be here, and I want to pass on our respect to them and gratitude for his service. And I understand this has been dedicated to him, rightfully so. My personal experience with him was just recently, where he helped advise me on what to ask our panel members. And unbeknownst to me, he was in a hospice and passed right afterwards. So his dedication truly was a passion. So enough sobriety. Let's move on to what's so important to us today. So we have two members of the Army here. And as Karen introduced them, they have a very important role to play as part of the Team Army. So what I discussed with them, and we're going to enact out here for you, is I'm going to let them give about 5-10 minutes, whatever time they need, to talk about what's important to them, and then we'll ask questions. And my understanding is, and somebody can correct me from the team if I'm wrong, is there'll be notes for you to be able to ask questions that we'll take at the last 10 minutes, like about 9:20 or so, to ask them, maybe a little early if we can move along. So please, I encourage you, if there's things that you have a burning desire to understand, let's see if we can't get them up here and entertain answering questions that are so important to our future. So, General Brito, I'm going to start with you. You're right to my right.
Okay.
If you would give some thoughts.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. And it's indeed an honor to, spend some time with you this morning and my distinguished panel members as well. I would like to expand just a little bit on the mission statement that Mrs. Saunders talked about for the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command. Just to give a little context, one, for our joint partners in the audience today and our industry partners as well. I do have the honor, as mentioned, of commanding the United States Army Training and Doctrine Command, which is responsible for not only the accessions of, but training the most lethal soldiers and developing competent, proficient leaders so that our Army can continue to contribute as a global fighting force in support of joint operations. And I don't say that to be doctrinally geeky, but I do say that to underscore the importance of what the command does in partnership with our joint partners, our other commands across the United States Army, and of course the support of our industry partners. And just to recap a bit, the command operates along 5 lines of operation. sessions, and our piece of that, bringing in the best soldiers of the for all three components in the United States Army. All that is necessary with training those most lethal soldiers, one upon entry and throughout the career. And that's very important. And it hooks to the support that we have with our industry partners that I'm looking at today, and of course the support that we give and need from our joint partners as well. Developing the most proficient, well-trained leaders across the Army, not only when they come in as second lieutenants, but throughout the context of their professional career. That's very important as well. And two that may not seem to hook into readiness, but clearly have a big importance: shaping Army culture and helping to guide the future force of the United States Army. And I use that last one to connect to the purpose and outcome possibly of this conference today. And that, what I would like to mention, I was mentioning some of the opening remarks, a lot of what we do is very much a team sport and future force development of the United States Army, and I'm sure the other services can relate to that as well. The acquisition, the working with our industry partners, clearly defined, precisely written requirements, which would be as important to our industry partners as well. And unique to what the command does, working with our other ACOMs, or other Army commands, are the integration of our, I'll throw the first acronym out, the integration of our DOTLM PF, the doctrine, organization, training, leader development, people, facilities, and of course material. The material can be looked at as a big M and a small m, and we'll talk to that, I'm sure, throughout the context of the panel today. So leveraging all those capabilities, working with our sister services, working with the other commands across the United States Army, and of course our distinguished Army civilian staff, and clearly working well-defined requirements for our industry partners, allows us to develop and maintain the readiness in the Army that we need now, working part of the Joint Force as well. And as mentioned in the opening remarks, focus on the requirements of Army 2030, which in many respects is next week, and of course developing the concepts and capabilities we need for 2040 and beyond. So with that, I look forward to the opportunity to speak to you the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Thank you, General. Honorable Bush, your thoughts.
Sure. First, welcome everybody. You're getting a healthy dose of Army early in the morning in large quantity. It's kind of the Army way. But really glad to be here. It's an honor and thrilled to be here with my joint colleagues. So they don't always gather us in one place too often. We normally have separate conferences in DC, so it's great to have a joint one here with our teammates in the Joint Force and OSD. So let me talk briefly about the context of overall Army equipment modernization, and then a little bit more about focus areas in the training domain. So the context is really previous administration initiated a large number of modernization programs with a goal of trying to, over time, fundamentally and rapidly modernize Army equipment in a new direction to reshape the Army for its role against the threats we face today. This administration, we've largely carried on that plan because it was a good one, including, I'll get to it, the great work going on, a lot of really awesome success stories, quiet success stories in the training domain. But that overall effort focused on additional, for example, long-range fires, air and missile defense, network, soldier lethality. We've now built upon that and training. We've now built upon that to start adding some other things. So you may have seen a new focus on logistics and contested logistics, a new focus on intelligence gathering, a new focus on cyber. So the plan is on track. We are doing well overall, not without its challenges. And industry, we have to work with industry, and we are working well. But I'm happy to take criticisms or ideas or thoughts when we get to the Q&A about what we could be doing better. So that's the big picture, and the Army is committed serious resources to this and remains committed to it. So within the training domain, we've got three major efforts, and then within each one there are several parts. So first of all, the umbrella idea of the synthetic training environment was one that the Army worked on before I arrived. We've continued, that tries to coordinate and synchronize development of a range of different training tools, all the way down from individual soldier systems to collective training at the division and higher levels. All in a synthetic environment, all connected, all using the same data, all able to work together seamlessly. So that compares to the past where we have terrific training systems today, but they've been kind of cobbled together over time. We make it work in true Army fashion. We overcome the discontinuities with just brute force, and our folks do great, but we want to make things easier for our leaders and our commanders and our soldiers. So that overall effort runs a wide gamut, but it includes everything from new training devices all the way up to, like I said, mass collective training. Another major effort going on is a new focus on providing training at an enhanced level for intelligence and electronic warfare. So recognizing that those two areas and those two domains are more important than ever, fighting against potential sophisticated enemies with like capabilities, the ability to actually train those soldiers to do intel and EW at a high level of fidelity has always been a challenge. It's difficult to replicate those environment, always has been. My other services wrestle with the same challenge, but we're on a path now to develop a new system to allow intel and EW people to train at a high level of fidelity in a simulated environment. And another I'd mention is cyber. So the persistent cyber training environment, here again, a very difficult thing to train because the first of all, sometimes classification levels, but also the ability to have a representative threat that is truly challenging to an operator has always been a difficult one. But this new effort, I think, is making great strides to actually having a cyber training capability that is meaningful and challenging and something we can adapt over time. So that's broadly what we're doing in the area of developing systems for General Brito and his terrific team to actually train the Army. That's our role in acquisition. We're a support element. We are here to support the Army. It's a team, and we are doing our part as part of that team. Other thing I'd mention is some new tools we're using in acquisition. So here I'll go down a level to some things that are new ways of doing things that we're trying to do. The first one is take advantage of recent flexibilities Congress provided. So my years on the Hill, toward the end of those years, there was a concerted effort to try to provide the department and the services with new, more flexible acquisition pathways and tools so we can just do things faster and better. That imperative for speed is what was behind those reforms from Congress. That concern and the willingness to provide more authority and flexibility is based on a concern that our enemies are moving quickly in these areas. We have to go faster. So doing that responsibly in acquisition is the challenge, but we're doing it. And we're fully embracing these new acquisition tools. The first one is middle tier of acquisition, which just lets us not shortcut, but accelerate a lot of the traditional processes in the department to actually get real things on contract with you here in industry so we can actually get stuff to General Brito to train with. So cutting years out of the acquisition cycle was the main goal of that system. And I think we're going to have some big successes coming up. Ms. Saunders and her team, you can go see them, where we have used those authorities and we're going to get new training equipment in far faster than we've done in the past to the field. The other one, and I will defer all difficult questions on software and AI to my terrific deputy, Mr. Young Bang, who's going to be doing a panel later, but it's the software pathway. So in some ways more radical even than middle tier. It's actually, though, for our industry colleagues here, it's the government trying to actually do software the way industry already does it. So we want to meet you where you already work. So this is doing software fundamentally differently. It is a very streamlined process. It focuses on getting initial code, initial products, not in a matter of years, but in a matter of months, and then iterating on them indefinitely to keep up, which is how industry works in the software field. We're adapting to that. We want to meet you where you already hopefully are. That requires a different approach to contracting. It requires flexibility and very close work with our requirements partners, including General Brito and his whole team, to make sure that when we're doing this fast, we are actually doing what the soldiers want and what General Brito and his team need to train the Army. But compared to the old way of 5 or 6 years and then cranking out a product that was already outdated when we produced it, we've got to change, and we are changing. So those two areas are where I think we're fundamentally doing acquisition different to try to, frankly, keep up with innovation in the industry and the needs of the Army, which we're just, again, in a faster pace than we used to be. And we in acquisition have to adapt our way of doing things to meet that demand, and I think we're doing that. So I think I'll leave it there. I really look forward to Q&A, but it's an exciting time. The Army's doing a lot very quickly. It's not all perfect, but we need feedback. It's one thing I want to get this week being here from our colleagues in industry, but also learn from the other services and what they're doing. So it's one team, but look forward to the Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, that gives me a lot of gist to ask questions. And I particularly appreciate the discussion about articulate requirements, because as my old acquisition hat on, there can be nothing better than having a clear understanding that you want to convey to industry.
Yeah, we got General Brito surrounded by acquisition.
I noticed that.
We love you. So let's go to requirements. You've recently released FM 3.0, and I understand you're working it closely with FM 2.0, which also excites me, intelligence-based operations and requirements to help train and ready our soldiers. This is a lot of work for the Army. Are there priorities? Do you have a strategic plan in place?
Well, yes, it is a lot of work. And I would highlight, it was a year ago, FM 3.0 operations came out, rolled out in conjunction with AUSA that's 2 months ago now, FM 2.0 intelligence. And we're working on an aggressive path to have one of logistics sustainment, 4.0 coming out soon. Now, I mentioned the titles for this reason. You can't, and you shouldn't, separate operations from intelligence. It was mentioned the great work we're doing in the logistics world as well, so why not publish doctrine as a guide connected to those warfighting functions, which helps drive all that our Army needs to do, working with the Joint Force to be capable, fight and win, and we will, in a multi-domain operations. Now, tied to that, the priorities are very much tied to our secretaries and our chiefs' priorities. One, the ones mentioned in the opening remarks, but two, just to have a warfighting-ready Army. And I hate to put it in simple grunt terms, but that involves a lot. And it's really not all that simple. So tied to that doctrine, the priorities would be, and very much tied to the acquisition and modernization timelines process as well. So we'll have supporting ATPs, we'll have supporting training plans, we'll have the doctrine, training plans, manuals, circulars, whatever you want to call them, tied to our modernization also. Just as a small exemplar, Honorable Bush mentioned the soldier lethality cross-functional team and some others that are helping to work some of our modernization. So as that team should develop a new weapon, for illustration, I'll just call it a new rifle. No need to go into depth. It's important that this command, working with the Army Command, Futures Command, and others, links in early to develop the doctrine, the organization, the training, the leader development, the integration I mentioned in the opening remarks, tied to that piece of kit, so that the kit in itself is not just out there. And when you do that, you enhance the lethality of the individual soldier, you improve the lethality, the collective training of the respective unit, you improve their performance when they go to a combat training center. I'm putting this in broad strokes, but ultimately all those together, when an individual as part of a unit deploys or an organization deploys supporting a joint force operation anywhere in the world, he or she and that unit will be lethal, and that's what we want. They're going to fight and win and come back. So that underscores the importance of all that I just mentioned up front, and the doctrine's a guide to help get us there. And lastly, tied to Honorable Bush's points, we need to do it fast and continue to do it fast. One, to keep up with the pace of modernization, but more importantly, keep up and have that overmatch that we need as an Army and a joint force over our adversaries. Waiting for doctrine to take a year and a half or more isn't going to work. Right. Supporting the acquisition timeline that's going to take 4 or 5 in the past, several years, isn't going to work because we need to maintain that overmatch over our adversaries, and that's what's most important. To close where I started, to hook that back to the FM that you mentioned, that underscores the importance of the doctrine and operations, intelligence, as you mentioned, in 2.0, and we need to put it out fast, working as part of the team in supporting our modernization efforts. Thanks.
Fabulous. I'm excited. I hear Army's Future Command talk about human-machine integration and the concept of making 1 + 1 = 3 in terms of performance and capabilities. So the maturing of how you train and how you use technology to support training and how you build that out as a team, Honorable Bush has a large play, and not coincidentally has put out some really impressive new requirements in this digital world. And I think of PE Stri's Common Synthetic Environment that just put out a recent procurement activity, and the advanced program IVAS putting out the next technology upgrade. Are you seeing Army get access to the tools that it needs, the technology that it needs? Is industry seeing and getting in front of you and saying, here's what we can do?
I mean, broadly, yes. I think this is where, the innovation in this country and the innovation in defense industry, we depend on it. We rely on it. Every answer should not be the Army telling industry exactly how we're going to do something. We need to hear from them. We need the innovation that's coming from the private sector. And I think we're getting that. So broadly, yes. I think the challenge the Army has is just, as always, it's just resources. How do we allocate resources to modernize quickly, while in this area of training, for example, while trying to do everything else? But to bring it back to General Brito's point briefly, and it's absolutely true, the Army doesn't send equipment to war. We send units of soldiers with equipment. Everything has to be built around a formation that has a mission to do, rather than a piece of equipment. It's a bit of a different approach. It's just the way the Army's built. And I think we've done a better job recently, but it's always a struggle to make sure that we are starting an acquisition program and thinking about the training part up front, especially when we're doing it faster. You can have a terrific piece of gear, but if it's very difficult to train, it's just not going to be as effective, or if it's too expensive to train on, it's not going to be as affordable for the Army to do at scale. And everything the Army does is at vast scale. Millions of people, hundreds of thousands of soldiers. So, affordability there becomes a key factor for us, especially when we're developing new systems.
Well, that certainly is easy to jump on. One of the challenges, I think, with a huge organization, as you speak, is not just the affordability, but the mass, the scale that you need to represent in order to effectively get a soldier trained appropriately. And I think, General Brito, that synthetic training environment is obviously a place where you can capitalize on it. What do you think about the synthetic training, and how does that help you execute your doctrine and give you feedback for the building of additional requirements?
Well, certainly. Before I go specifically to that question, you mentioned the challenges of mass. I would like to offer what we've learned, one, working with our partners and across the other services and the other commands within the Army, is the value of collaboration, clarity of what you need, and then sometimes experiments where you can test with a certain brigade or platoon on a capability and see if expanding that level of mass works, for one point. The great value of a synthetic training environment, it pulls together the outcomes of live, virtual, constructive capabilities that are important for our United States Army and our soldiers. And I would offer this up the same for a joint force. It allows you to test capabilities in a synthetic environment. And I'd like to also mention, we have a bazillion young soldiers that join the services, young service members that join the service, of course, soldiers that join the Army. These young soldiers, I've noticed, just unique to the command, get it. They pick up on the virtual capabilities. Joysticks and keyboards are not a challenge. So why not leverage the technologies that can come with a synthetic training environment, and it helps you build up towards, one, going to combat, larger scale operations, the CTC operations, and you can enable it to get better at home station training. So just put yourself in a setting. You're in a sim center at Fort Itsec, so it doesn't matter where you're at. So what the STE can give us is the terrain reality of any part in the world in that training center. You can see it. The capabilities that a existing or a future piece of equipment can give you, and you can attest on that in that training environment as well. Part of a gated training strategy to get you to a dirt training scenario. Not in and of itself. You can build on each other. The capabilities that can give a platoon or a battalion commander, a company commander, to pull in all the enablers that he or she may have when deployed in a synthetic training environment. And I'll give one example if you can just kind of paint the picture here. I was visiting some event AIT training not too long ago at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I actually sat in the simulator for the first time, me, along with a specialist, who was much better, by the way, on bulldozer operations in a warehouse. And that simulation piece of kit allowed him, in this case, to train everything he would do, even if he were driving that in the desert somewhere, but didn't have the expense of blowing the track that he did in the simulator. Just couple that in a collective environment, and you can see the value of investing and continuing to train with everything the ST environment will give us, both now and in the future. And that'll make you better when you have to do it in the dirt as well, and when you deploy also. And I'll stop there.
Oh no, this is fabulous, because to me, I'm hearing all sorts of things that I could just play into for a conversation. I think, Honorable Bush, I think one of the things that is underscoring what the General is talking about is your data strategy. In order to be able to do and collect to inform improvements to TTP or to readiness or to just basic training to get to your MOS is this concept of synthetic training. And oh, by the way, it might provide an opportunity to occlude our TTP, reveal or conceal from adversaries. In terms of where you think we are there any limitations or impasses that you're seeing in terms of collecting the data, utilizing the data, creating that data strategy and making it happen?
So I wouldn't say impediments. I think we have to be good partners with industry as we do this. So it is a new model. We do now value data kind of the way we would. It's almost, it has a value. It's something we both need to not just generate as we train, but also then use later to either train systems, train AI, or better understand ourselves. And we on the government side need to be good partners, work with industry, make sure it's fair arrangements we have, make sure we're clear up front about our needs to retain and use data generated by systems we're developing with industry, while not going to the max extent of some terms that have been thrown around in the past, which venture into really the government wanting to be completely in control and have complete access to all the IP and everything behind it.
Yeah.
So we've got to find that balance point with industry to make sure that we're being good partners, that industry can still be profitable while developing these systems with us, but at the same time getting access to the data and being able to use it, not just get it, but use it in a way that makes sense. So I think it's still early days. The Army's got a lot of new things coming out. Mr. Bang Young can talk a lot about our new data strategy and how we're taking a different approach. But I think we're on the right track, but I need feedback. I want to hear from industry about whether we are or not, because this is something we have to get right.
I think to hear from industry what you just said in terms of IP and how the future is going to have to be developed off the back of what we've learned in lessons, both active and synthetic, in other words, inside of training. I would hope that they would be able to pick up on that and start thinking about how can they offer the support that's needed to be able to do this. So I'm excited to hear the conversation lead that way. One of the things that came out of this short dialogue is also the scale at which the Army is. And when we're now full bore engaged in emotional, not bad emotion, but significantly energizing us because of the peers adversaries that we see on the horizon, I think that translates into really rethinking our training to your recent release, and both of the 3.0 and the 2.0, and also what is the foundation of our training for the future when we know our American soil is no longer given the distance that it used to have from being able to have an effect occur on soil, whether it's non-kinetic or kinetic. When we see the impacts of the next generation of warfare, how do you think, General, MedCom and other entities would, like Army Corps of Engineers, other elements of the Army, play into this new world of training? And what are you seeing happening, and what are you leading into this change?
Well, certainly, that's a very important question, and a relatively difficult one, of which we're tackling. So specifically on those commands, I want to back up a little bit. It's extremely important. I'm not tying this to the doctrine. I'll call it old school thinking, is to fully understand the threat capabilities of what our adversary can do. And as you mentioned, whether it may be kinetic or maybe non-kinetic. It may be the impact of information operations. It may be what cyber can do to you without pulling a single bullet. And then the extended reach both ways, both for us as a joint force and the adversary as well, in this multi-domain, multiple MDO environment. So what you may be touching on is the mass and scale of, one, how we conduct medical operations to a scale we might not have seen before. Same with replacement operations. And all of that can be, and it brings in the value specifically to your question, when you receive the input of the Army Corps of Engineers, the Medical Command or Medical Center of Excellence, those that work personnel, then bring in their insight when you develop training scenarios, all of which can be replicated, the threat capacity that I just mentioned. It could be in a DIRT CTC rotation, it could be in a simulations environment, it could be both. It could be, and it is, in this respect, the warfighting exercises that we give for divisions and corps to replicate our capabilities against those replicated threats. So the conveniences, for lack of a better word, that we may have had in projecting forward may have changed. The ability of our adversaries, either kinetic or non-kinetic, to impact our ports of embarkation on this side of the pond is something that we must consider. And I know as a service, Army, and I know the Joint Force as well, through some of the experimentation and warfighting exercises we're doing, are replicating what that could be. Someone playing the red team. My own unit, TRADOC G2, helps to do that. Matter of fact, just recently did that supporting a naval exercise. So you can see the extended, replicate the capabilities of our adversary, and yet ours as well against them. And that's extremely important at this point. And I actually hope we never have to see a large-scale casualty operation or personal replacement. But we must train for it at scale at home station training and our combat training centers, and much larger in our warfighting exercises and experimentation and our joint exercises as well with our partners. And one last comment, if I may. It's equally as important, and this ties to Dr. Honorable Bush's comment, and sharing the requirements with the industry of what we may need to offer that level of clarity, to help us maintain that overmatch. This is not, it shouldn't be a fair fight. That's not the goal you want.
Right.
It's a matter of overmatch and always maintaining that overmatch, whether it's achieved through the synchronization of material and everything else, or training. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. And it leads towards, I've got wonderfully great questions, and it leads to one that follows. You started down the path, and I'm going to leverage it, and it can be for either of you to talk more about, but we cannot play the next big game solo as an Army. It's going to be joint, and it's going to be international. And there is a lot of activity talking about international. How do you see us being able to get our own act in order, but also be interoperable and integrated and trained to be able to fight side by side, both organically to the U.S. and internationally?
Want me to start, or
Either in the material solution or in the requirement space, either way.
I think better to start with the requirements, although I could lead with, we come to our partners, international partners, we used to be the only ones with training systems. We used to be the only ones who had some of the networking capability, but now a lot of them have it too. So we have to, it's not just imposing the U.S. Army or the U.S. military's view on our allies in terms of how we're going to operate together. So it's gotten more iterative, and I have more conversations with my counterparts about how to acquire these systems. I think one thing I want to hit on, the general mentioned, our U.S. military, not just the Army, two of our hidden superpowers that come out when there's a conflict, one is logistics, the other one is actually training. We show up with logistics at scale, and more importantly, highly trained people. And you see the difference on the battlefield. And I think you're seeing now in some of the conflicts we're involved in, supporting allies, what a lack of training results in. So, everything we do in the Army is ultimately making sure that from a material side standpoint, that when soldiers do go to combat, they can succeed. And providing training systems is probably, we have to have things that work in combat, but we also have to be able to train them. As a young officer, I saw how the two came together, and no one does it better than us, in my opinion. But we have to maintain that overmatch, as the general said, in the area of training. It's just as important as every other area we do.
if I may expand on that, concur with all at every echelon. So I know our service, I know the other services do as well. We have partners, we have partner nations we work with, we have partner services that we work with as well. Sharing some of our very own schools at the very individual level. So building that relationship, both in understanding of doctrine, application of lessons learned, and how we fight as a joint partner, as a coalition partner, it starts at the individual level and obviously can work up through the respective echelons. Pulling on a string that Honorable Bush mentioned, I'm very excited and to have seen this over the last couple of years and know it's going to continue to get better in the years ahead. Some of the joint training exercises, not only with the other services, but some of the agencies in the government that could be supporting things as well. And that's critical. Those who provide logistics who may not be wearing a uniform of some type, it's critical as well. That's at a respective echelon. You're not going to do it every weekend, of course, but those exercises can be planned, and I know they're being executed now. We've all seen them. And I'm sure I can speak to every service represented here today, probably have somebody deployed outside the continental United States doing something, and it helps to focus on that level of interoperability. I've also, from some previous experience at one of our combat training centers, where we had both services and allied partners training, you might learn the capabilities you don't have in a respective system when it comes to interoperating together. And that's also good in that training environment. You can weave it back into the system and see what needs to be fixed. Again, that highlights the importance of the collaboration and the communications. Thank you.
Excellent. So we can build things, and then we have this challenge in this new environment, this digital engineering environment, all the things attributable to non-material, non-hardware, you can't touch or feel it. A lot of the questions are coming in. I'm going to try to paraphrase with one question, and it actually has a part for both of you, and it is, okay, we've built it. How do we test it? How do we get that verification and validation without slowing us down too far? Are there thoughts that you all have about how we can, as we learn to use this new tool, call it artificial intelligence, call it digital engineering, call it whatever nomenclature you'd like, but what it is hard and it's new for us because we're just entering into this new world. What do you think are the tools that we have, soldiers, technology?
So in the area of AI, our ability to test it starts with our ability to understand it. So the Army's got efforts underway, the other services do as well, to build our capacity to fully ingest, understand how they've been developed, and actually make sure we understand what we're being offered or what we're proposing to use in the area of AI. Now, we'll go at different speeds here. So use of AI across, for example, management activities of the Army, the business of the Army. I expect those to go very fast because industry is already moving there. And there's many ways we can use AI tools like industry does to be more efficient and more productive. It gets a little more difficult when you get into things that are operational. So, for example, an intelligence AI tool that helps us do targeting. Well, we have to understand how that was developed, what data set it was trained on, what its biases might be. Because ultimately, an intel system like that for targeting is going to get linked eventually to the use of lethal force. And that is not something we are in a position now, and our current policy is not to turn that over to a computer. A person still has to decide when to take another life. So our ability and what we need to do is make sure that we can keep up with the amazing innovation in that space and start to build the capacity in the government to be effective partners and go quickly rather than just relying entirely on what we're being told something is. But that's on us. The government has to develop that expertise, so we're partners with industry and informed partners. On the software side, I think we need a little more risk tolerance, frankly. We have I think the Army might be unique in we have a material release process that we've applied to software. Sometimes it makes sense, other times it just doesn't, and we need to take a little more industry approach to where we get software out. Kind of the testing often happens with the operational force, not an artificial test environment. We have to be comfortable with that. We can do it the right way. We've done it on several new big software initiatives where we roll it out in stages rather than trying to test it perfectly. So I think we just have to get more comfortable with doing it, testing differently. You're never going to be able to test all the certainties. one caveat to that, and we are making strides here, is cyber testing, just to make sure what we're providing soldiers is secure. So that is something where, working with industry, I think we've got an ability to use advanced cyber tools to make sure we're testing things in advance of them going to the field. It does take time, but we have to do that because, you know, a private sector system that's got some cyber vulnerabilities can be an inconvenience, but a system that's going to go in the hands of soldiers who would have to go to combat potentially, it's not an inconvenience. Now it's a risk of their life. So we have to be as good as possible at that early and upfront.
I think your point about the advancement and the speed at which this is happening is really critical. And it's in particularly, I think the word conflab was used earlier in a dialogue, and I love that word, so I'm going to use it. It's a conflab for us to be able to fit that into the profile of how we currently equip, train, recruit, et cetera. And I would like to think that we have a path for taking a look at what tools that can we appropriately use in the terms of our ethics, morals, the way we think as a nation, and still be able to keep up with what's coming. One of the areas that I have a ton of questions about is recruiting. And are we thinking of new ways of going actively out to recruit? And does any of the tools that you're seeing that are coming out in terms of training or if you would, evaluating possible areas for recruiting and recruiting of individuals coming to the fore in your mind, General?
Well, certainly, that's a very good question. And I would like, first of all, I want to caveat up front, our Army has maintained its qualification standards and entry standards for the soldiers, have not lowered that standard whatsoever, which is great. And up front, I mentioned in my opening remarks as a #1 line of effort of sessions in support of Headquarters DA, Department of the Army, of course, and our piece of the pipeline break. But to your point, in maintaining the quality soldier that we want to bring into the United States Army, we also see that some future capabilities tied, I believe the comment Honorable Bush mentioned, was amazing innovation. So we realize now, both in the current force, that we need to step up the game a bit, and we are, in training some data literacy components, the need for coders and software engineers and others out there in the force today to maintain that fighting edge. Fast forward to recruiting, specifically tied to your question. We also know and assess, based off known requirements and forecasting future requirements, the type of soldier that we need to bring in. And that could very well mean, and we're doing this, on college campuses and other places, recruiting or cyber affairs of some type, the type of soldier that shows that propensity and skill to come in and do that job. That may not be needed for another 4 or 5 years, and groom him or her throughout the pipeline to give that type of soldier that we need. As important for the tank driver and infantry soldier as well. Well, those future force capabilities that are known now, and they come out in that team sport analysis, allows us to go out and recruit that type of soldier that we need. I'd like to tie one other point to that. When they're in, they go through basic combat training, AIT as well. It's as important for this command, training doctrine command, I'm sure the sister services do it also, to update the training that we give them to be proficient on that system, to be retrained and recertified on that system, and perhaps forecast what's going out in that system. It could be a lethal piece of kit. It could be the next software system of the future, and all that needs to be trained as well. So this is very, I like to say oversimplified it, but it's pretty complicated. And not only bringing in the quality soldier that shows the propensity and that talent, but reinforce and build that talent throughout his or her enlistment or their career.
Excellent. I only have one question, and I'm trying in my mind to pick out which one of these fabulous questions makes the best sense to ask.
Let's do the speed round. Come on.
We got it.
I would like actually to give you both gentlemen an opportunity for last remarks, and I think it would be best if we could take a look at it through the future lens and through the concept of small business and large business teaming, because I think a lot of the training advances are being made in software and tools that are new, and you're involved in them. And I think Project Convergence is an area where we're trying a lot of activities out in this new environment. So I'd like to give you both a couple minutes to sort of say what your thoughts are to industry and to the population, because we've got a mix of both international, government, and industry people here.
Sure. First one, I want to mention, circle back on something I mentioned. You know, I've worked in government a lot of my life, worked in the Pentagon only recently, but I am conscious that we are sometimes known for doing the classic government thing of telling you all what the answer is to our problems. That shouldn't be the case, especially not in this field, and especially not in anything digital. We need to take advantage of the innovation in the private sector in this space. And specific to training, for example, is anyone in here with a teenager, you know, I got one and I got one 20-year-old. To put it mildly, they spend a lot of time in a digital environment. They spend a lot of time gaming. That's a good thing. And their expectations are pretty high for when they join the Army about what experience they're going to have with training. But all of the private sector innovation behind that, we need to leverage into our training systems because, no, it's not gaming, it's training, but there are links between those two worlds, and we have to bring them together. There's amazing innovation we should take advantage of. So that'd be number one. The other one is we in the government need to be a good partner. You know, we are, I know, a demanding customer. We have a lot of rules. You know, that's not all our doing in the executive branch. I get a little help from that on Congress. But some of those rules, for example, with contracting, thank you for your patience, working with us. But, you know, it's the American people's money. So, yeah, there's going to be a little more rules. But we need to be good partners with you to make sure we can contract quickly and get things moving at a rate that's relevant to your business. And I think what we need is feedback on just how we can do that better. We are trying to be more streamlined. We are trying to use new tools. But at the same time, we need your partnership in industry to both give us ideas on what we can do better, but also tell us how we can do things better. Because you know, America's great innovation engine is the private sector. It is not the government. And we need ideas. We need energy. We need new things. We need to be critiqued the right way, so we are better partners to work with industry, not working at cross purposes. So if I have one big message that underlies a lot of what we do, trying to do an acquisition, is that we have to do this together. The government can't do it all alone. And then to bring it back to this area of training, I think there's enormous potential for us to leverage great work going on in the digital space in particular, so that we don't have, you know, we don't have to start everything from scratch. We should be able to build on what's already out there, and I hope that's happening.
Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I would add to that, and I think the composition of this audience shows the amazing opportunities we really have, both in uniform and industry partners, and of course, those representing the respective staffs of the services. You asked an earlier question of ways to continue to train that. I'll give this through my operational lens, because I'm obviously in the Army here. But the value of communications, the statement we made a couple of times throughout this, the teamwork, you can lay out touch points to test respective capabilities. We need to be extremely clear and precise in requirements or problem sets that we ask industry to help us solve and test those solutions. And before you go too far down the pipeline or invest a lot of money and time or intellectual energy, test those solutions. If it doesn't work, then you pivot left, you pivot right. We're doing some great work with that now with our network systems, which also would benefit the service and other services as well, fighting as part of the joint force. So given that level of detail in the plan and the respective training that supports you, is very much the output of a team sport here that comes with a collaboration. Of course, you have the financial investments. We have rules that we have to follow, which are mostly helpful most of the time. But again, that needs to be simply discussed. And those soldier touch points, opportunities to pivot, opportunities to reinvest, and then leveraging the intellectual energy that I'm looking at here and capacity here to see what 2040 might require and back up. And then respective to command, linking in all the Doutland PF requirements so that when it comes out, I'm trained and ready for it. I'm not seeing it for the first time when I'm deployed at a FOB in Afghanistan. And we have moved beyond that as an Army and are in a joint force. I'm excited to see where we're going in 2030 and 2040. Thank you.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, if we could thank our panelists for such a great job. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hoo-ha!
So little notes there. Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Thanks, Hank.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, thank you, Honorable Katrina McFarland, Honorable Douglas Bush, and General Gary Ambrito for a terrific and thought-provoking fireside chat. Let's give them another round, please. Next, I'd like to introduce our academic keynote, Dr. Doug Bowman, the Frank J. Mayer Professor of Computer Science and Director of the Center for Human-Computer Interaction at Virginia Tech. Dr. Bowman received his undergraduate degree in mathematics and computer science from Emory University in 1994, and his MS and PhD in computer science from the Georgia Institute of Technology in 1997 and 1999, respectively. Dr. Bowman leads the 3D interaction group focusing on the topics of user experience in virtual reality and augmented reality. He received the prestigious National Science Foundation Career Award for his work on 3D interaction, and this award is only given out to less than 5% of those who apply for it. Dr. Bowman does a lot of work for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, or the IEEE as most of us know it. He served in many roles for the IEEE Virtual Reality Conference, including the Program Chair, General Chair, and Steering Committee Chair. He also co-founded the IEEE Symposium on 3D User Interfaces, now part of the IEEE VR Conference. Dr. Bowman received the Technical Achievement Award from the IEEE Visualization and Graphics Technical Committee in 2014, and the Career Impact Award from the IEEE International Symposium on Mixed and Augmented Reality, better known as ISMAR, which is one of the most prestigious computer graphics conferences in the whole world. Dr. Bowman has also been named a Distinguished Scientist by the Association for Computing Machinery, or the ACM, and is a co-founder, or excuse me, and a co-author of the book, 3D User Interfaces, Theory and Practice. And finally, Dr. Bowman leads the Center for Human-Computer Interaction, an interdisciplinary coalition of more than 60 faculty at Virginia Tech. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Doug Bowman.
Thank you very much. I've never been played in that way before with the Hokie fight song, so hopefully there's some Hokies out there that we're singing. So thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm greatly honored to be here today. This is a great community. I have great respect for the work that's done here across all the different services and industry members and academic members who are here. I want to thank the conference organizers, especially Dr. Elliot Weiner, for their support and their trust in me to give this industry keynote today. Dr. Weiner was extremely helpful with insights on the community and what might be helpful, so thank you, Elliot. So, I'm going to be talking about lessons learned from 15 years of basic research on immersive training and tactical AR. And I want to start with a little bit of my own story, so if you'll indulge me. As Elliot said, I finished my undergrad in 1994 and immediately went to grad school at Georgia Tech, where I was first introduced to virtual reality by Dr. Larry Hodges, who's pictured here. And I remember the first VR demo that I had was this virtual elevator that you see on the top right of the slide. The computer graphics were pretty poor. The head-mounted display and the tracking system were laughable by today's standard. But when I went up in this virtual elevator, I felt my knees shake, and something happened in my stomach. And I realized that virtual reality was a technology that had a potential to be a real game changer. It was a medium that was unlike anything that we had before. So that demo led to me doing my PhD work on virtual reality, and I finished my PhD dissertation on 3D interaction in '99 and started as an assistant professor at Virginia Tech immediately after that, where I've been my whole career. As Elliot mentioned, I continued this 3D interaction work and published a book, 3D User Interfaces. But really the story that I wanted to tell today started in 2006 when I began a research agenda on the benefits of immersion in VR. And it's a really important question because virtual reality as a technology was very unproven at the time, and there was a lot of skepticism as well as a lot of excitement about its use. So we needed to understand, are there benefits of this technology? And because of that research agenda, I did a sabbatical at UC Santa Barbara in the 2008-2009 academic year because they had this amazing facility called the Alisphere. I don't know if anybody has seen the Alisphere, but it's hard to take a picture of it, but you see it here on the bottom right. It's a 3-story high spherical display. It's got an amazing spatial sound system, and it's truly the definition of what it means to be immersed in a virtual environment. So while I was there, working at UCSB and with the Alisphere, I was working with my colleague, Dr. Tobias Hollerer, in the UCSB Computer Science Department. He's pictured here on the upper left. And both of us received an email that was sent out to our research community mailing list by Roy Stripling, a former program officer at the Office of Naval Research. He's shown here on the upper right. And the call was for something called Immersive Sciences. So Immersive Sciences was supposed to be about basic research on fundamental aspects of the use of these immersive technologies, with special attention on the relevance of these technologies for military training and simulation. In other words, the goal was to develop fundamental theories and knowledge that could serve as the foundation for applied research and innovation in immersive technology for this community. So Dr. Hollerer and I submitted a white paper, and we were awarded a grant in 2009 from the ONR Human Performance Training and Education Program. And that grant was evaluating the effects of immersion on naval training applications. So as you can see, every few years since, we've continued to submit and receive new awards from this program. And most of this work has been funded by Dr. Peter Squire, who's here this week. And I really want to thank him for his vision and leadership in having an understanding of what fundamental research we need to do to make these technologies useful and practical for this community. So I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Squire and also Dr. Hollerer, who's been a part of all of this work, as well as all the students whose work I'm going to talk about today. So the first 3 awards that we received were really kind of on the topic of immersive training, which we've heard about a lot this morning already. And the 3rd award started to get into additionally the area of how to use augmented reality in an operational environment. And the following awards have been focused on that as well. So in the few minutes that I have this morning, I wanted to focus on what we've learned about these two topics. So first, immersive training. So the question that we really have been guided by in all of the immersive training research that we've done is, does immersion have benefits for training? And this, again, is an important question, because if we're going to use these new unproven technologies, we need to know that we can actually measure quantitatively some benefit over existing approaches to training. So to answer this question about immersion, of course, we need to understand what we're asking. And so I've put the definition of immersion here on the slide that we've been using. We don't think of immersion as a subjective feeling. Instead, we think of it as an objective level of fidelity of the virtual experience. So how faithful, how realistic is the virtual experience compared to the real-world experience that you're simulating? So that allows us to reframe our question. We could say, instead of does immersion have benefits for training, we could say, does making the training experience more like the real-world experience that one is training for result in measurably better outcomes? So since immersion is on a continuum, according to this definition, and since many things contribute to it, there are also other questions that we can ask, like how much immersion do we need for effective training? Or what specific components of immersion are the most beneficial? And even, do some levels of immersion have negative effects? So let me talk about this idea first of components of immersion. So there's many elements of a virtual reality or augmented reality system that can increase its fidelity, both through hardware and software. So here's an incomplete list of such components. So for example, one can make training higher fidelity by increasing the field of view of the display to be closer to the human field of view, or by making the models of virtual objects have greater detail, or by making the way that the user manipulates virtual objects closer to the way that we manipulate objects in the real world. So it's helpful, I think, to classify these components. And so we identified 3 categories of immersion by analyzing the user system loop that's shown here. And those categories first include display fidelity. So this is probably the easiest one to think about. For example, the Google Cardboard and the Vario XR3 are both immersive VR displays. But of course, the Vario has a much higher fidelity in terms of things like field of view and resolution, among other components. So display fidelity is one category. A second category is interaction fidelity. For example, if we use an omnidirectional treadmill, like shown on the right here, for locomotion, that's much more like navigating through the real world than it is to use arrow keys on a keyboard to move around. And finally, on the top, we can increase immersion by improving the fidelity of the virtual scenario, by the simulated scenario. For example, the virtual scene on the left has, on the right, excuse me, has better geometric detail, better lighting, better textures, and so on. So with those categories in mind, we can reshuffle our list of immersion components to see examples of VR/AR system components that fall in each category. More importantly, this provides us a systematic way to study and evaluate various ways to improve the fidelity of training systems, and to evaluate the contributions that different individual components of immersion make to the overall benefits of immersion. So that was some theory. With that theoretical framing in mind, let me briefly discuss a few examples of the studies that we've done to understand the effects of immersion on training systems. So first, this is a study from 2010, so please forgive the quality of the graphics. But in this study, we evaluated how field of view and field of regard, both components of display fidelity, can affect people's ability to learn and recall complex spatial procedures. We trained them in virtual reality, as shown on the left, and we assessed training transfer in the real world, as shown on the right. They basically had to move these objects around and put them in specific locations on a numbered board. And we found that having a wider field of view and a wider field of regard during training improved both accuracy and recall significantly during the assessment. So this is clear evidence that higher fidelity displays can directly benefit training effectiveness. In another study published in 2015, we looked at a visual scanning training task. We trained users in virtual reality to follow a particular visual scanning strategy as they looked for threats in an urban environment. We found that, again, wider field of view was beneficial, causing users to perform better on the visual scanning training task. And in that same study, we also varied the scene's visual realism and looked at its effects. So this is a component of scenario fidelity. And these are examples of the 3 levels of visual fidelity that we studied. We found that if users trained at a higher level of visual realism, as shown on the right, their performance in a simulated real-world assessment task improved. So again, we have evidence that a higher level of scenario fidelity can improve training transfer. But not all of our studies revealed benefits of higher levels of immersion. In another study in 2015, we looked at the fidelity of locomotion techniques when navigating through a virtual environment. And one of our conditions was the Virtue Sphere, which you can see in the video here. It's a locomotion device that allowed users to physically walk in any direction for any distance in the virtual environment. However, as you can see in the video, the movements of the user with the Virtue Sphere were often tentative and unnatural due to its weight and inertia. So we compared the Virtue Sphere, which has a medium level, I would say, of locomotion fidelity, to both a low fidelity technique that just used a gamepad, a typical kind of Xbox controller, and to a high fidelity technique of physically walking through a large track space. And as you can see in these plots, the Virtue Sphere was significantly worse in terms of both accuracy and speed measures. So that led us to hypothesize that for interaction fidelity in particular, there might be an uncanny valley effect, in which moderate levels of interaction fidelity have negative impacts on effectiveness. The basis of this hypothesis is that when interaction techniques present themselves as being realistic, but they have important differences from real-world interactions, users try to interact using their natural skills, their existing skills. And that doesn't work well with these medium fidelity techniques. Therefore, the upper bound of effectiveness for medium interaction fidelity techniques might be lower than the upper bound for both high fidelity techniques as well as low fidelity techniques, which can be effective when designed well. So I had a student, Madi Nabiyuni, who for part of his PhD dissertation did a meta-analysis from the literature of whether this hypothesis might be true. And without going into the details, you can see here that what he found is pretty much in line with our hypothesis. Okay, so let me summarize with a plot, kind of the total sum of what we found about the benefits of immersion for training. The results I'm going to illustrate here come from 25 different publications, about 28, I believe, different experiments over 15 years. And so it's a complicated plot, so let me give you a couple of examples first of how it works. So this first line that I'm showing shows that we had 4 results saying that for a spatial understanding task in VR, high display fidelity was significantly better than low display fidelity. For example, it might be that stereo was better than non-stereo for a spatial judgment task. And here's another example. I'm coloring it in red because it's a negative example. And this line shows that we had 2 results that for a visual search task, moderately high display fidelity was significantly worse than low display fidelity. And these results were both about simulator sickness. When we showed people a higher fidelity display, some people got more sick than if the display was lower fidelity. So now let me show all the results for display fidelity and also some results for interaction fidelity and just a couple of results for scenario fidelity. And you can see that overall we have very good evidence that higher fidelity is better across many different tasks, different components of fidelity, and different measures of effectiveness. There's not many negative effects of higher levels of immersion, but they do exist. I mentioned the simulator sickness results and also the issue with moderate fidelity locomotion devices that I talked about earlier. So it's not uniformly positive, but it's overall very positive. All right, so let me move on to tactical AR for a few minutes. So this is the second theme of our work, which is about the use of head-worn augmented reality systems by warfighters in the field for operations. And there's several reasons why AR has great potential for this application, including the ability to access information hands-free, the possibility of maintaining better situation awareness because you're not looking at a device, and the potential to augment the real world to improve perception, understanding, and integration of digital and physical information. Despite this potential, of course, there are significant challenges to bringing this technology to bear during operations. So some of those challenges, which many of you might be working on, are just making the hardware good enough. It needs to be light, it needs to be powerful, it needs to be robust. But other challenges that I'm going to talk about are related to the experience of using such systems for real work. So let me briefly touch on some of the basic research we've done to address those challenges. One basic challenge for outdoor AR systems is spatial perception. Because the AR system doesn't always have an up-to-date and detailed model of the real world, virtual objects might not be correctly occluded by real objects. So consider this video showing the case where one user's gaze direction is visualized for a second user, which might be important for joint attention during tactical operations. As you can see, without occlusion cues, it's very difficult to judge which of the pillars the other user is looking at. And we actually can't see which pillar it is until our view is very close to the other user's view, which is not very useful. So our solution was to have the user indicate both the top and the bottom of the object of interest, so that we can display a double ray that brackets the object visually. And that's much easier, as you can see here. We also designed a parallel bars visualization to help the observer understand the orientation of the gaze ray in space. We did an experiment run outdoors with real AR systems, and we discovered that the double ray approach in particular had significant positive benefits for both speed and accuracy for the observer, and only added a little bit of workload to the pointer. We've also been working on approaches for displaying and interacting with information for tactical AR. We call our approach glanceable AR. And the idea, as illustrated here, and this is more of kind of a business or knowledge work scenario in the illustrations, but the idea is to put AR information displays in the periphery so that the user can access them at a glance, but at the same time, the information stays out of the way to limit distraction, occlusion, or interference with the real world. We've run many studies about different aspects of glanceable AR, but let me just highlight a couple in the remaining time I have. So first, we asked users to evaluate 4 different configurations. We compared configurations where information was always visible on a heads-up display to those where information was off-screen in the periphery, but accessible with a head turn. We also compared showing the full information display to showing only an icon of the app, which could be selected to reveal the full information display. And overwhelmingly in this study, users preferred placing the information outside the field of view and displaying the apps as icons initially, because this configuration interfered the least with what they were doing in the real world. So a consequence of this is that we now need an effective and easy way for users to activate the apps in order to reveal their information. So we studied 5 different activation interfaces, as shown in this video, for both sitting and walking scenarios. The first interface is kind of the current standard, which is based on dwell time. You look at the app for a certain amount of time to activate it. The second interface is blink. We use the eye tracker to sense a double blink to activate the app. Third, we tested fixation glance, which actually measures not only gaze direction, but also gaze depth using the eye tracker. Fourth, we used hand overlap. We placed the hand behind the information to reveal it. And finally, we used head depth, where the user leans backward to activate the information. So we found that in our study, for the sitting task, many of these techniques worked equally well, as you might expect. But when users were mobile and walking around and having to interact with the real world while they were walking, fixation glance and blink were by far the fastest and most preferred. And I think this is really promising for tactical AR scenarios when there's lots of movement. And we only want to use eye movements to interact with the system. So those are just some examples, but I think you can see the sorts of challenges that we have when we're designing user experiences for tactical AR. So let me conclude by offering some overall reflections on these 15 years of research with immersive training in tactical AR. So first, for immersive training, as we saw, immersive technologies, both VR and AR, do have measurable benefits for training performance and for transfer. And there's some guidelines that designers of immersive systems should follow. And there's many of these, but 2 examples that we talked about today are prioritizing wide field of view and field of regard, along with natural head and body movements, and being careful with semi-natural locomotion devices. On the tactical AR side, I believe more than ever that AR has the potential to transform operations and to replace existing digital devices, not only in the military domain, but also other domains, and even for just everyday life of consumers. But successfully deploying these tactical AR systems is not just about hardware specs. Even when we achieve an eyeglasses form factor, an all-day battery life, and excellent performance, careful design of the software that delivers the user experience is crucial. And so I showed some examples of that. And then finally, I want to share some overall lessons learned, and I'm almost out of time. But first, I want to stress the importance of fundamental research, not only at academic institutions, but also in DoD basic research labs and other places. We really need to understand not only how to build these technologies and how to make them work, but how to design these technologies to be most effective for the tasks that we care about. And these goals require the development of theoretical frameworks and the careful design and analysis of basic scientific experiments, which can only be done in a fundamental research setting. Secondly, I want to emphasize the importance of collaboration and exchange between DoD agencies and universities, and also with companies in industry. There's a whole ecosystem of funders and fundamental researchers and applied researchers and product developers, and all of them really need to work together in order to advance immersive science and its application to achieve real-world results that we all want. And finally, I'd like to say that although fundamental research often results directly in just scholarly publications, it does have a significant impact on the tech industry as a whole. I talked about my sabbatical at UC Santa Barbara, but I didn't mention my other sabbatical, which was at Apple in 2015-16. And when I was working at Apple, I really saw firsthand how this basic research on the fundamental aspects of these technologies is having a direct impact on what's being developed at big tech companies. The most recent example, of course, is the Apple Vision Pro, which will be a consumer AR/VR device, and whose design and applications were directly influenced by basic research in the field, including work funded by the DoD agencies represented here at Itsec. So this means that fundamental research is making our warfighters safer and more effective, and at the same time leading to advancements that can benefit all people in their work and personal lives. So thanks very much for your attention and for the kind invitation to speak today. I hope you have some food for thought from this talk today as we think about the future of immersive technologies for education, training, and operations. I look forward to continued conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. I would now like to introduce and hand things over from NDIA, the Honorable David Norquist, President and Chief Executive Officer. Honorable Norquist.
All right, good morning. Thank you for being here today. I want to begin by offering my war thanks to our Fireside chat speakers, Secretary Bush and General Brito, for taking the time out of their very busy schedules to be with us here today. I also like to thank our industry keynote speaker, Dr. Bowman, for providing his insightful perspectives, which we'll all take home and apply over the holiday weekends coming up with our kids' toys to now understand how we actually can use them better. We have a lot of events coming up for you today, so I'm now going to do the first training part of the training, which is if you have not downloaded the app, take out your phone. I will not be offended. Take out your phone and stare at it now. This is the polite part. And what I want you to do is make sure you go to the App Store, in whether you're an Apple or Android, and type in I/ITSEC 2023. That will download the app that will list for you all the range of activities that will be going on over the course of this week. And there are way too many. If I tried to list them, you would lose your entire break. So I will skip that part and ask you to take advantage of reading them. You'll see the exhibitions, the customize your agenda, you can connect to social media channels. It's especially useful if you want to plan where you want to be to make sure you don't miss key events or key speakers. A lot of these sessions are being recorded, so should you discover that things are happening in two places at once and we don't have our cloning technology working yet, it'll be posted online, and after the fact you can get to see what you want to see. With that, let me wrap up the opening ceremony by saying thank you. Enjoy the coffee and networking break. See you back here for the Senior Leader panel at 10:30. Thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. As a courtesy to the presenters and your fellow attendees, please silence all mobile devices. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome back. My name is Guy Walsh. I'm the Executive Vice President for NDIA, and this is my very first time to attend Itsec. And I can tell you very simply, it's eye-watering. Every newcomer should have the opportunity on their first day here to come up and stand behind the podium and be able to join such a group here. So many of us joined yesterday. So for those of you who were here yesterday, we had our Congressional Mod and Sim Caucus here. We had Congressmen Jack Bergman, Darren Soto, and Bobby Scott, and they addressed the audience in the morning talking a lot of different issues, from the erratic budgets and continuing resolutions, but really about the value of modeling and sim and what Congress has been doing to reinforce and help what we're doing, whether on the government side or the industry side. But I was struck by Congressman Bergman. He was talking about the Five Eyes. And when he was talking about Five Eyes, I was used to, you know, what we're used to in terms of the 5 countries. But he said, no, in my case, we're going to be talking about 5 Eyes that begin with the letter I. And he talked about, first again, integrity. He talked about intent. And then he talked about what we've been discussing this morning, which is all about innovation. Basically, innovation coming, as Honorable Bush talked about, coming out of industry, but for the DoD and for the rest of us to be able to adapt and bring on innovation. And then he talked quite a bit about initiative, and then finally about intensity. And what I can tell you about our senior leader panel here is that's what we have up here, right? We really have the 5 Eyes in terms of what they have done in their positions that they're out there. So, and so before I introduce the panel members, I'd be remiss in not recognizing that I have the honor this year of acting as your moderator. And for those who have been here before, you will know that this is the position that Jim Robb would be standing in right now if he were here. Just over 2 months ago, when Jim and Debbie asked me to be prepared to backfill Jim as his health was deteriorating, we talked through that. And similar to the guidance that Elliot got, Jim gave me, basically 3 guidelines. He said, when you come up to do your introductions, be very brief. The audience has all these bios, and they came here to listen to the panel members and not to you. He said the same thing. The rule number 1 that we got was all do what Debbie says. Okay, so Debbie, thank you again for that piece there. And his final piece, and this is probably no surprise to anybody, and that was, and Guy, give Debbie a raise. Okay? Jim was always taking care of his people, and that was huge. So our theme again is really about sustaining a global force in a digital world. It's not necessarily a new challenge for us, it's just an ever-evolving set of challenges that we have right now. And so joining on the stage are 5 senior leaders who have dedicated much of their careers in service to the country to advance the needle in tackling these hard problems that we have right now. Again, a reminder, the 3x5 cards are going around the room. And so what you're going to see here is we have several of our NTSA volunteers, actually over 300, but there's about 7 or 8 of them that are going around. And so it's really about the interaction and the questions that you're going to ask, not me as the moderator going to ask. But what we're going to do is each of the panel members, we're going to give 5 to 7 minutes in the transmit mode. And that's really to share their objectives, their visions, their framework, what their teams are doing behind the scenes. And then after each of the panel members has had that 5 to 7 minutes to do their presentations, then we get into that dialogue. And that is the important part of what we're trying to do with these panels. It's really about your questions, your concerns, and your issues that you face, whether you're on the government side, the industry side, the academic side of what we're doing here. And how do we really continue to build, train, and sustain a global force in a digital world? I want to point out, again, when you look in your pamphlets there, it says that we have the representatives of the services up here and the DoD, but the diversity backgrounds of what is on our stage here with our senior leaders goes well beyond the services and the uniforms that they represent. They cover a gamut of leadership from operations to policy to industry to active duty to Guard and Reserves. Their skill set range from product development, from high emerging technologies, AR, VR, IoT, to being operators of 4th and 5th generation platforms, logisticians faced with the challenges of contested logistics and supply chains, planners and policymakers. Again, if I read the bios, we'd waste the rest of the time here, and so Jim won't allow me to do that. So with that, what I'm going to do is introduce each of our panelists one at a time and let them give their 5 to 7 minutes of speech. And first, to your right on the stage here, but Mr. Yang Bang, a senior executive and the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Training. You heard Honorable Bush mention him several times, talking about his background on the industry side and software and a lot of the emergent technologies. So with that, Young, it is all yours.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction as well as the invitation to speak here. You heard the Army talk a little bit about the Army modernization and how we're delivering capabilities for 2030 now. One of the things that I always talk about as part of the Army modernization is that it's underpinned by digital transformation. And when you think about the topic here, really about the whole notion of sustaining a global force in a digital world, what does that really mean? And for us, we've gone through what we call the digital odyssey, which is our journey to really be more digital as a service. And in this context of a global force, that also means kinetic and non-kinetic. With our sister services, with OST, with our allies in the Indo-PACOM theater, and that's critical for our mission. And the way that we think about things is that the speed in which we've done acquisitions, amazing, super fast. We've gotten capabilities out to soldiers 2 years after we've gotten requirements. And when I came in the Army, it literally took 10 years to build something, another 10 to field it. And so when you think about that, it's not only do we have a lot of the authorities given to us by Congress, like the MTA and the software pathways, our ability to go quickly is really underpinned by digital and the digital world. And for us to continue this pace of innovation and speed of delivery of capabilities, we really need industry's help across the board. You heard Mr. Bush talk about meet us in the middle. We need industry's help across the space. And one of the things I wanted to highlight was that part of that is really very appropriate for this conference. We need to really keep on upskilling our warriors, our leaders, our soldiers, and upskill them from a digital context, right? And when you think about that, it's like going to the gym. You do reps, you do sets, right? You build that muscle memory. Our soldiers are incredible, and the way that they think about innovations, the way that they'll take a solution and figure out how best to apply it to the mission is amazing, as shown by everything that's going on with the current situation in the world. But to do that in a digital construct is a little bit of a shift that we have to do. And you heard General Brito talk about it earlier. A lot of our soldiers that are coming into the Army are born natively digital. They know how to play video games. They know how to actually interact. They understand the user experience and the intuitiveness of things. But the Army has to shift a little bit more, and I think that's really critical to get the training, to get the education, right, to upskill our leaders and soldiers so we can really perpetuate that. And just like the analogy of the whole going to the gym and getting the reps and set, we have to continuously work in a digital environment. We have to actually do our reps and sets in a digital environment. We have to train our soldiers and warriors in a digital environment, and there shouldn't be an arbitrary divide of physical and virtual. We have an opportunity to converge all that, and I think, again, appropriate for Itsec here. So a couple things that I want to hit on. You know, you see some of the guiding principles up here. I'm not going to hit them all of them, but a couple things that I think are critical here. The low signature, what does it mean to be in a digital environment? We have bandwidth, we have storage and compute, cloud available, you know, across the board. But that also gives up a pretty high heat signature, right? And a digital signature. And if you've looked at some of the things that are going on in the world right now, that's a quick way that we're actually using to target Russian capabilities or look at, you know, our peer threats. And so we have to do a better job across the board, and I think we need industry's help to give us the capabilities, but to also look at it from a low signature context, right? And so some of those skills have atrophied. You heard a little bit about Mr. Bush talking about we're really driving more of the intelligence and electronic warfare capabilities, as well as our cyber capabilities, but we really need industry to be mindful of, as you're building these exquisite capabilities, help us reduce the signature so our soldiers don't get caught, right? The other thing on that is that interoperability is going to be huge. For us, we really drive MOSA, right? Everyone's probably heard about that before, modular open systems architecture. But the way that the Army's doing it is we're doing that digitally as well. We're requiring certain contracts to give us digital models, right? So that can actually be consumed in a virtual, augmented, digital environment to help us not only develop capabilities, but to develop training for our soldiers, right, faster and better, right? And you heard Dr. Bowen talk about some of the realism of the interactions, some of the realisms of the models and the physical models itself. Well, what better way of getting that is than to have industry help us with the models as we're developing capabilities to also develop that so we could actually do the training. And so the other thing that I would really hit on is intuitiveness. If you're a big fan of Apple or the Tesla, think about those concepts. It's got to be intuitive for our soldiers. We cannot go back to the world that I grew up in, having a DA-PAM this thick and an FM this thick to flip out when we get a new kit that's fielded to our soldiers. We need the capabilities to be intuitive, and then they being able to access the information they need in that environment. So think about more than just the user interface. If the applications of that capability aren't intuitive or is super complex for them to get, it's probably not going to work for us. We need to be able to do that quickly. We need to be able to train our soldiers very fast, and then that has to be intuitive training as well as intuitive user experience. And I know a lot of people have been talking about user experience. UI, UX coming from a tech person, got it, makes sense. But we're really driving human-centered design or soldier-centered design, more than just the UI and UX experience, right? It's got to be really focused about the soldier, and General Brito from TRADOC is always talking about soldier being in the middle. And then that's the same context that we have to think about training and the intuitiveness of our capabilities. And the last piece here that I'm going to hit on real quick is constant iteration and innovation. We really need industry's help here in this space. And we need you to come meet us in the middle. We're not quite there in a digital world yet, but we're learning and we're looking at how do we apply your capabilities. But don't come to us and say, here's the coolest tech that I have. It's not innovation. We need you to help us solve our problems. We don't want a better mousetrap, right? We want capabilities, and we want you to apply your technologies to our problems. That's innovation. Giving us technology isn't really true innovation unless you can apply that. So, you know, Dr. Bowen talked a lot about the basic research. Basic research is awesome. Technology is awesome. But apply that research, apply that technology to our missions, and help us fight in a multi-domain operations. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and say, beat Navy!
I'll introduce you. So first, I'm going to have to call Congressman Bergman and add a couple eyes there with iteration and integration and continue to grow on that. So our next speaker, again, is Lieutenant General Kevin Iams, Commanding General, Training and Education Command, U.S. Marine Corps. What I will start simply is, as you see in the bio, amazing career in terms of operator, in terms of combat operations. And for those who were here, either last year, the year before, but this is his fourth time on the stage joining us. And you will find that much more than, and from an aviation perspective, again, having flown for 25 years as an attack pilot, I can tell you that every time I was doing a turnover in a combat situation and either taking over from a couple of F-18s there, I always knew that my situational awareness was where it needed to be before they left the scene. And then number two is if I was turning over to some of my Marine aviators at the time,
I knew that the ground commander was in good hands because that was absolutely tremendous opportunity for our interaction. But again, if you met with and saw his presentations last year, you'd see that he's been a tremendous thought leader in the areas of education and training. So with that, General IAMS, it's all yours.
Hi, General Walsh. Thanks very much for the very kind intro. I started off this morning thinking that I was a digital native too. I actually even told my counterpart, yes, I'm going to use my phone and my notes. Not a digital native. I forgot about the glare. Thank God I'm a Marine Corps fighter pilot. Knuckle dragging with my crayons. I still inked out a couple of 5x8 cards, so I'll still deliver, ma'am. I as well am going to be missing Admiral Robb today, so Godspeed to him. And for all of you who've been giving our Marine Corps very well wishes for our Commandant, thank you very much. Brief update, he's doing outstanding right now. He's coming back to us. He's doing so well. Quick little fun vignette. When he was in the hospital, we took away his cell phone because we didn't want him to work. We wanted him to recover, but he is the consummate warfighter. So we got hold of his wife's cell phone, and while she was out of the room, texted my wife and relayed, hey, I need you to tell Wolfie I'm okay, I'm coming back to the fight, and here's a list of things that I need him to do by next week. So always in the fight. God love him. He's our best leader, and we can't wait to get him back in the seat. So fourth time here. Hopefully I'll get this right and maybe add a little bit to it, but thanks to our partners at PM Traces, NDIA, and NTSA, we're making some significant enterprise advancement. From the time that I was first here in 17, and then after the COVID and watching what we're doing, it's actually impressive. I said that we wanted to be a fast follow the last time that we were here, and I will tell you, we far exceeded that. We're very much accelerated beyond that. So what are the changes that we're seeing? And I would say that they're probably rhyming with what General Brito and Mr. Bush were iterating to us a little bit earlier. We've gone from the industrial age to the information/digital age. We truly have. There's no going back now. We just need to embrace it and continue to move forward. We've gotten out of where we were investing in IRAD and R&D to think about problems that we were going to tackle in the future. And we've made some operational stretches to demonstrate what we wanted to do, have the entire cohort recognize where the challenges are. So now instead of spending more R&D and IRAD, we're spending PMC and O&M to actually deliver capabilities to the fleet. Just like Dr. Bowman was talking about, we're looking at fidelity across the board. You know, we used to build low fidelity simulators so that we could have them be integrated. They weren't very much used to us as far as a trainer was concerned, and it didn't really provide the realism to the exercise force that we needed. So where is the happy medium? It's not the high-end fidelity simulators that we've built in the past that are completely proprietary and their data systems don't work across the board. We've got to move to holistic training. We need data standards as we move to the future so that, again, everyone's system from the joint and the partner world can all play synonymously across the board in the training environment. We need to move away from one-size-fits-all trainers and do some VR tailoring as we move to the future. Yes, they can be modular, compartmented, but we do need those things tailored specifically to how drivers and operators are going to interact in the future. I'm really proud that we've got some complex stuff that's going on, visuals and interaction for even our young Marines, sailors, airmen, soldiers, and Coast Guardsmen out there to give them the feel of what real is going to be looking like when they get out onto the flight line or out on the ship. We're improving lethality and standards across the board and marksmanship. We're shooting robot targets so that folks understand what it's like to actually hit a moving target that's attacking you in the field. We're putting force-on-force training systems out there now in 24. All of our MEFs will have them. Why? Because we want to train our commanders how to think. We want them to have real-time feedback and learn how to make bold, consequential decisions that they can do in training before they get to combat operations and then become risk-minded. Take the risk now, learn how to do it, and move forward quickly. We're also moving forward to some new capabilities. I love my Navy brothers. They've got the Navy Continuous Training Environment that they had developed. Like any good Marine, plagiarism is the best form of flattery. So we've repurposed that. We call it the M10. We repurposed some servers that we had in an antiquated training system, put them on the end nodes, and now we too have a training system that networks with the Navy, so we have one COP moving forward. Even for amphibious operations, we had 2 different COPs for the battle space workers to look at. Unset, moving to the future. For our service level training exercise, just like SES Bang was talking about, we've got to look at how we generate a complex and contested battle space as we move to the future. So what does EMSO look like on the battle floor? That's going to be with space effects coming down to take away the GPS, to create a noise floor, not just so that we have to run our signals down to nothing, but how do you run them down far enough that you can operate below the noise floor, still communicate, but still be undetected and lethal? So we've got a lot of work that is going into our training range out in 29 Palms to bring that up to speed. But what are we doing as a service writ large? And I would tell you that's, I said 2030, Training Education 2030 was going to be a document last year that was going to set the standard for where we're going to take the Marine Corps for the future. We've just rewritten that document. It's called the TARE, Training Education Annual Review. So it's got a couple of updates to it, and I'll just kind of iterate those really, really quickly for you. And if, while I call it the TARE, those who have to fund it probably call it the TIER, since there's about a 2B behind it. So what is it? It's a 5-2-2-3 program, so these are the 5 foundational elements that our Marine Corps will continue to do as we move to the future. That is, make Marines, give them MOSs, do unit level training, service level training, and then do PME. If we're going to train or change those things as we move to the future, we have to do it in a couple of different ways. One, it has to be all about lethality. If it's not rooted in lethality, it doesn't merit a change. 2, it has to have rigorous, repeatable standards that we can measure and tell whether we're getting the bang for the buck out of the changes that we're making to our force. And if we're going to spend money on changes, the first has to be to develop force design as we move to the future, and then modernization. Inside Training Education 2030, we came out with no less than 37 directed actions and 16 items for further investigation. Instead of going after those one by one, we synergized those into 3 large projects that you'll hear us continue to talk about. That is Triumph, Trident, and Tripoli. Triumph is all about creating the cognitively agile Marine that we need for the future in multi-domain fights. So we need asynchronous learning capabilities so that they can train at their own speed of intellect and move out faster, have less time to await training as they move to our fleet forces. Next is Project Triumph. I think all of us are aware that we need a multi-domain fight against the adversaries as we look to the future. But how do you train to it? What does a joint interface control officer do as we move to the future inside of a fire cell? I don't think we've quite figured that out just yet, but that's what Trident's going to do for us. Teach us how to train and build naval joint and partner-enabled kill webs as we move to the future, and then how do you close them? And then lastly, you've heard us talk about Project Tripoli. This is building a live, virtual, constructive training range, essentially the multi-domain training or combined arms training range of the future. Netting everything together, all of our exquisite capabilities, all of our long-range precision munitions, and putting it in one training environment. So just like SES Bang was talking about, we can train to that now, at full fidelity, get the sets and reps that we need before we go into combat operations. Let me just close with saying that we're still focused on a number of options inside our portfolio, to first build joint and partner capability, multi-classification enclave level capabilities so that we can train to everybody at full high fidelity. We want new simulators for our new systems that are coming online for Nemesis, our OPF, and our amphibious combat vehicle. We need standardized adversary models as we look to the future. And then, of course, I'll owe a beer for this, but we need more AI. We need to actually put AI into how we're going to build our constructive models out there so that they are real for our training force. We also need to look at how we're going to rapidly prototype some of these things as we move to the future, especially our VR and our XR. And then lastly, I'll just say, since our inception, our Marine Corps has been adaptable and ready to change. It was 80 years ago this date that our Marine Corps was executing its first few iterations in amphibious operations. We were just consolidating on Tarawa. We're going to do that again today. We're going to move fast. We're going to iterate. We're going to move forward. We're going to put fear in the hearts of our adversaries. We're going to outthink, outpace, and outmaneuver our peer-level adversaries and bring our force to bear for victory. The challenge to all of you is come see us. Join the Marine Corps Revolution. Come out and see PM Traces and come see TCOM's booth that we've got out on the floor and be part of this young revolution. Thanks.
General Iams, thanks. I had the opportunity yesterday to go over, and you're talking about the new simulators we need. And again, going through the exhibits of a lot of our industry partners over there, looking at everything from the medical simulations to the Apache simulations. So if you haven't had a chance to see where we're going with some of that and what industry is doing in terms of innovation and bringing some of the level of detail that Dr. Bowman just talked about here with AR, VR, please take time to do that later today. Our next speaker, also returning from last year, is Ms. Caroline Baxter, Senior Executive and the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Education and Training. That title basically means that she is the principal senior authority on the development of DoD policy on all issues related to military education and training across the Joint Force. More than 11 years with RAND Corporation, and I see that part of your education was up in St. Andrews in Scotland. So with that, welcome to the stage. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'd also like to pause before I jump into my remarks and comment on the passing of General Robb, who was Admiral Robb, I apologize, who was a wonderful mentor and an extremely meaningful member of this community and a real stalwart and really believed in the mission that we're all here to do. And given my portfolio, was an extremely valuable member of the broader community that I leaned on heavily when I started my job to learn how to actually execute the mission of my office. I will miss him very much. I know my office will as well. And I'm very grateful that he created this event in this community that allows us to really connect with each other and also for offices like mine to go on transmit to get the messages out every year that we desperately need to. So if my key message on this stage last year was we are running out of time. We're running out of time to rethink, to refresh, and to transform training. And then after that, I outlined some of the things that my office was doing to accelerate that change. And I'm going to be providing a bit of an update on that today, on where we are right now. But let me open by saying that my sense of urgency has not abated. And that's not because we haven't made progress, we absolutely have, but because what it means to be trained and educated and ready for the future fight continues to evolve for two reasons. First, global events obviously are pulling our forces and our resources and our attention to multiple theaters in support of different conflicts, all requiring diverse capabilities. And managing the training and education required of a force so dispersed is a challenge in and of itself. The second reason is what the pace of technological change demands from us in terms of a complete mindset shift. If last year my takeaway message was we are running out of time, my message this year, taking a page from the sciences, is this. Readiness for the future fight is a question of chemistry, not physics. By definition, physics deals with interactions between the fundamental constituents of the observable universe. It is matter and motion and energy. It is, relatively speaking, precise and predictable. By contrast, chemistry is about transformations and reactions, the changes that substances undergo, and the energy that is released or absorbed during these processes. 20th century warfare is physics, force on force, platform-centric, solid, and heavy. 21st century warfare is chemistry, pulsed operations, data-centric, AI-enabled platforms, fluid and light, the battlefield shifting, the enemy adapting, our forces losing and regaining the advantage through flexibly reintegrating weapon systems, using newly gathered information to shift tactics, techniques, and procedures in real time. With the state of the technological art advancing faster than we can bake it into our plans, it would be the height of arrogance to assume that in an active conflict, our adversary would maintain a static state of proficiency, allowing us reliable overmatch. We need to stop thinking in physics when chemistry defines the battle space. So what does that mean for training and education? For training, it means redoubling our focus on the tactical and operational level training that aggregates to strategic advantage, closing gaps where they exist to drive the proficiency of the force for the future fight. Now that focus might cause, perhaps should cause, difficult conversations about how that training gets supplied, supported, funded, and organized. And it means no longer white-carding space, cyber, EMS, and other domains in war games and exercises, but baking them in, which then spells concomitant changes in professional military education curricula to generate additive opportunities for experiential learning outside the schoolhouse. It means a renewed commitment to the ultimate goal of military education, which is not the content as much as the capabilities forged, creative, critical, and courageous thinking. It's also why, in the training space, my office is maintaining our focus on bolstering training infrastructure and capabilities, but also generating the methodology by which we can accurately assess our gaps. Because without a yardstick to measure the distance between our force today and what the NDS and the joint warfighting concept demand, we can't possibly assume we can make, let alone measure, progress. Nor could we tell Congress we are making the best use of the last marginal dollar to increase the relevance and realism of the training the force requires. So now let me update this community on how much we've accomplished since I was last on this stage. So over the past year, we have truly forged a broad coalition between the services, the combatant commands, the joint staff, numerous components of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, to identify and field cutting-edge training tools needed to close our most pressing training gaps. My team has established a two-tier governance structure comprised of the new Military Training Executive Steering Group, or MTESG, the existing Military Training Capabilities Group, the MTCG, and created an overarching process, the Defense Training Governance Cycle, to enable its progress, and I'll briefly describe both. The MTESG is a three-star form, co-chaired by the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness, my boss, and the Director of the Joint Staff. It includes more than 30 representatives across OSD and each of the 5 services, the Joint Staff, and the combatant commands, and it reviews, approves, and oversees the execution of service-specific and joint training initiatives and determines which ideas and issues to push through into the budget process. The Defense Training Governance Cycle is an annual coordinating process to capture the information and data required for these governance bodies to align policies and budgets and translate service solutions into joint solutions. It collects feedback from the MTESG and enables the group to readily detect and incorporate military training initiatives that require resources into the budget process. So what? These things matter because together they're strategic enablers. They accelerate our efforts to transform training across the department, and not just through finding the most innovative next generation technical solutions, but by simply ensuring we can provide forces able to do the job our strategy documents tell us they have to do. And that comes down to a rock-solid foundation of tactical and operational level training. So with the MTESG and the Defense Training Governance Cycle in place and unprecedented support from DoD leadership, my office has been leaning very far forward to make progress on a number of training priorities. So we're focused on 4 big things. The first one, building out and critically standardizing, to General Imes' point, the live, virtual, and constructive and synthetic tools to develop realistic training that prepares people at scale for emerging threats and evolving capabilities. Second, tackling information sharing barriers standing in the way of joint and coalition training. Third, instituting common training standards across the services to further integration and support that kind of interoperability. And fourth, continuing to improve our training governance structure and processes to align training policies, resources, and activities. The MTESG and the Defense Training Governance Cycle have already begun to demonstrate their value and have helped develop more than a score of data-informed lines of effort. But going back to my original sentiment, my sense of urgency certainly remains, and we cannot take our foot off the gas if we want to implement them and improve joint multi-domain training at the tactical and operational level in all of these new domains. I'm very proud of the progress we've made. I'm very cognizant of the fact that there is an enormous left to do, and we're going to need to partner with this community, the services, the combatant commands, allies and partners in industry to quickly identify and adapt to new and shifting requirements, and also nailing down what those requirements specifically are. Ensuring that training keeps pace will require us to use the training infrastructure that we've stood up to develop a cogent understanding of what that peer fight will demand to accelerate our individual and collective efforts and move together at speed in support of our national defense and our shared mission. Thanks very much.
Ms. Baxter, thank you. And for those, many of our panelists will be doing other panels. I know that Caroline will be doing one on the Ukraine and looking at the impact of training and education and the relationships there later on. So that's one of the ones you want to take a look on, that app that David Norquist showed you earlier there. So our next speaker is Brigadier General A.J. Leone. He is the mobilization assistant to the military deputy for the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. For those of you not familiar with the title mobilization assistant, it's very simple. He needs to completely understand that position to roll in and do that, whether under crisis where we're doing 24-hour operations, but to be able to do that seamlessly. And so it really is having that title, that role, and having that position of the military director. But that's in addition to having a full-time job, because again, that's the part of the reserve component is we expect you to be able to do this, roll in, have these full duties, as well as duties at Charleston and Navigator, and a full-time job. So with that, AJ, it's all yours.
Thanks, Guy. I appreciate that. And this is my first Itsec, so thank you for having me. And what an education it's been already so far to understand just the ecosystem that revolves around this conference. And it's so much beyond just a single service. It's so much beyond even Department of Defense. It is also about our partners and allies, and obviously the rest of industry, but particularly backing up to the partners and allies and how important that is, because our future fight will depend on both Air Force, all the rest of the Department of Defense, and our partners and allies to get after it. So again, great honor to be here. I'm representing Honorable Mr. Hunter, who is the Air Force Assistant Secretary for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, and all of Air Force acquisitions. As Guy said, I'm the mobilization assistant to SAF-AQ, that's our designation, and so I'm the principal reserve advisor to the front office on really a couple of different components, but first is the integration of over 900 Air Force Reserve acquisition professionals that are integrated into the overall Department of Air Force acquisition enterprise. And I say specifically, I'm choosing my words carefully, Department of Air Force, because not only does Air Force Reserves have several hundred folks supporting Air Force active duty mission set, but also now they're integrated with Space Force acquisition enterprise. And so that's an important distinction. We are Air Force Reserve Command, and we support the entire Department of Air Force. And also, as General Walsh mentioned, my job is also to assist the overall acquisition efforts, research, development, test, for a portfolio of $60 billion. And it's a busy job that the front office and Air Force Acquisitions has to get after, as all of our other services do as well. But it's particularly busy and has been ramping up. And this is good, because I think these efforts that we talk about going faster, are working. I do. And so we're seeing it. We're seeing more industry engagement. We're seeing more commercial utilization of commercial technologies. And that's important. Also, the position I'm at, I actually get to juggle 3 different perspectives. So one is our Secretary of the Air Force's main perspective on reoptimizing the Air Force for global pacing challenge. And that's huge. That's taking up the lion's share of where the Air Force is going. But also I get to juggle Honorable Mr. Hunter's perspectives as well for Air Force acquisitions. And his three overarching perspectives are to deliver capabilities to our warfighters. And the second one is to shape our innovation base that's supporting delivering capabilities to our warfighters. And then also the third one is to look after how we're getting after our own acquisition structure, how we can go faster. And there's more on that later, but those are the three different perspectives. Those are two perspectives that I get to consider. And then the third perspective is that of Air Force Reserve Command and to be a wingman to our active duty folks. And Air Force Reserves, we're there to provide strategic depth and surge capacity to our active duty counterparts. And those are three different lenses that I get to juggle every day, and so it's rather unique. I'll dig in for a minute to our reserve priorities as well. And so Lieutenant General Healy, who's our Air Force Reserve Command commander, his priorities for us on the reserve side is to be ready now, which goes hand in hand about being there for our active duty counterparts, but also to transform for the future. And again, you're seeing a continuous theme on Air Force is that we are transforming for the future, getting ready, and continuing to make sure we're matching what we're seeing on the world stage. And so all of those are kind of folding in together. I'll also point out, just as a quick data point, Air Force Reserve provides strategic depth, as I mentioned, but we deliver 14% of the uniform capacity to our active duty counterparts, but at 3% of the cost. So we're a bargain to Air Force, and we're happy to be that wingman to our active duty brothers and sisters. Our senior leadership on the Air Force side is working hard to identify where and how our services needs to be ready for conflict. And our airmen and guardian need to be ready to fight against an enemy with capabilities that are already similar to our own. General Brito mentioned that it's about overmatch, and I thought that was very prescient in terms of what he said. We don't want to go into a fair fight. We want to make sure that we have the tools, the capabilities that are delivered so that it continues to be an unfair fight. And that's super important. A conflict with a pacing threat will likely be at a scale of fighting we haven't seen in the past. We need to be integrated as a service and as a department. And these future efforts require very realistic training, tools and platforms that are dynamic and also are able to keep up with the ever-changing battle space. I look forward to participating in this panel, hearing from the rest of the folks on the panel, and hearing from all of you as this conference continues. Thank you.
Thanks, AJ. So our final panel member is Rear Admiral Doug V8 Verissimo, and he is currently serving as the commander, Naval Air Force Atlantic. And so with that, Admiral Verissimo.
Thank you, sir. A first time to the conference. What I'm looking at is a hangar bay of an aircraft carrier during quarters. It's quite a view out there. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to hearing from the panelists. Unfortunately, I have a major commanders conference to go to, but I just wanted to make sure you all understood that the folks wearing the khakis, we have requirements professionals. Admiral Buzz Donnelly's out front. We got Admiral Chebby, who does all the engineering development and processing of our equipment going forward, and we've got Commander Cherico, or Admiral Cherico, Caesar. Like V8, it's easier to say Caesar. If you see his name, you'll have a hard time sounding it out. But he's in charge of all of our naval training, so a very good participation from the Navy to integrate with this conference. First of all, I'll start off with a problem. Number one problem is that is a very high definition picture up there. So I'm going to try to circle back to requirements, because I'm sure the requirement was I want some definition. And as a 58-year-old, 36-year service member, my vanity's a long way in the mirror, and I try to avoid mirrors, and that's a big one up there. But one of the problems when you do a system like this is if I start going like this with my hand and you compare it to the screen, it doesn't keep up. And so in this conference, if I'm going to do a little of an analogy of what we need to think about is what's the requirement versus what's the capability? Because we tend to think we can get it all and we can get it all right now. And we have to understand, I've really liked the instruction, the information provided on some of those bounds for requirements, particularly in the AI conference yesterday and some of the conversations we had this morning. We all need to keep that in our head, and if we just let us write the requirements, we're going to find ourselves into unobtainium, and I'll talk a little bit more about it as I circle back. So on the panel, I think I'm probably the generalist. I'm the type commander, Naval Air Forces Atlantic. I own the airplanes and the aircraft carriers east of the Mississippi. There is a lot of work that goes on to provide those forces for the COCOMs and the fleet commanders forward, and I'm kind of that last step before they leave out the door. So as a generalist, I'm the end user of the equipment and the processes that we develop here. I've spent most of my career on the waterfront in aircraft carriers and jets, but I've also had some touch points with academia and some development in the assessments division, specifically at N81 and the OPNAV staff. So that's what I bring to the table, and I hope I can add some context. So I got 4 steps, and I'll circle back to my first comment. Just first time here. I really like the inner service at the beginning of the title. It's not included in the beginning, but I also need to just foot stomp integrated. Not just integrated across services, but just integrated even within our own service. And I think Admiral Chevy would agree that we need to open up the cabinet so that we can, at speed, get equipment talking to each other rapidly, sequentially, in parallel, and get it to the war fight quickly. With trained individuals. That's a lot of key, easy buzzwords, but much more difficult to accomplish. Second, simplicity at the tactical edge. As a operator and as a generalist, warfare has not been getting more simple over time. It is getting more complicated. Therefore, we need the opportunity to train in a very immersive and realistic environment so we can find where those points of error and those points of duplication or the opportunity to eliminate error, because human performance is going to be key in how we adapt to the changing environments. And I liked your chemistry analogy. Chemistry can change pretty quickly, and the human beings need to adapt to that change really quickly. It is no kidding going to be from space to the seabed, and it's going to be all at once, and it's not all going to be kinetic, and that's going to be challenging for a industry that relies and has relied during the last 30 years on specific, real-time, accurate, unquestionable information. That fog of war, I think, is going to be really real, and we're going to have to emulate, simulate, exercise, and rehearse that type of warfighting. So I think I've got through my first 3, and I combine them together. So I'll just finish off at the end, my point number 4. We need to have tactical and operational expertise at speed. I talked about the integration piece. There is no room for egos. There is no room for parochialism. So I'm the type commander, going back to being Naval Air Forces, I'm the type commander of airplanes. I am very proud of my service, that we have an integrated fighting force that is certified, qualified, and continues to be capable with the, whether it be aircraft carriers or ARGMUs, when they deploy, and they are deployed, that they are capable of fighting in an integrated fashion. The speed of development of that integrated fighting capability has to improve. And I think a conference like this is a great opportunity to nug down and think about how we can do that. So those are my 3 points, and I'm going to circle back to the video just a little bit. We've spent some significant resources on equipment in the last 5 years. We've recognized the emerging threats. There is a need to really think about the manning and training of that equipment. So I'm in charge of man, train, and equip. Our training scenarios, our training processes, our doctrine to develop training systems are no longer keeping up with that integrated fighting force. Therefore, we have to integrate training into the software development, the equipment development, and the changes to that capability. Another reason that we have to open the cabinet to some of the data rights so that when I zap the airplane or I zap the weapon system on the Aegis platform, that I zap the training scenarios to go along with it so we can train our people. It is no secret that the propensity to serve and those who qualify to serve in our nation right now is not going in the right direction. Therefore, we have to train people and take that limited manning resource and get more out of it. Like all services, we very much run on that you bring somebody in off the streets, you take 3, 2, however quickly you can do it to make them a journeyman so that they have the capability to provide a return on investment. No other company does this the way that the DoD does. We bring in rookies, amateurs, and we make them journeymen, and that is a sunk cost that we need to be more efficient and reduce that cost so that the limited manning we have make fewer mistakes and are a more capable fighting force. If we try for perfection like the camera up there, we're going to spend too much time. So we really have to make some risk decisions and judgment calls on how we take care of those people that we're bringing in. We have to provide those people with a quality of service, a place to stay, training environment that is conducive to the way they grew up and not the way we grew up. And I think this conference has some incredible capabilities to make that happen. We also have to demand from those service members that they provide quality of service back to us. They have to be ready to fight. And I'll finally close out in my service, and speaking for my service only, I think it's probably true with my Air Force brothers and sisters. I know it's true for my Army brothers and sisters. But I think most true in the Navy. We have spent an incredible amount of time training our watchstanders in the fighting locations. Whether that be an aviator in the cockpit of an airplane or a watchstander in an E-2, looking at a radar screen all the way down to the combat systems operators, we spend quite a bit of time thinking about that training. There is a need to get that training and that capability and those lessons we've learned on standardization and precision across the fleet in a more rapid manner. And I think technology and simulation and emulation and modeling and simulation at the tactical level can really teach us what trains sailors, soldiers, airmen, guardsmen, Marines more rapidly for a more complex environment. So I'll close out with, I love the conversation about requirements and specific requirements and how we as DoD manage the people's money in building a fighting force. I'll give you just the opposite side of that coin is we have to understand what our use cases are, and we have to be willing to pursue and communicate with those folks that are the engineers and the developers to figure out where technology exists today, find a use case, and rapidly procure and produce that capability. So if I were to give you the requirement for this video screen, and I said I wanted perfect clarity, and we went down the 2-year development, and it came back, and I don't have the speed required to solve the mission, and the first engineer that saw my requirement knew that was going to happen and didn't communicate back, we have failed as a team. And we are going to fail in developing that trust with those soldiers, those four, that tactical edge in the battlefield. We're going to fail to develop that trust that we need, that the simulation they did is representative of the real world. And it really has to be. So I think this is a wonderful conversation. This is a great group. It's my first. I fully intend for it not to be my last, but I serve at the pleasure of the President and the CNO. And I'm a little long in the tooth, but I'm really looking forward to what we can get provided here and what we can think about together. So thank you.
So I'm looking down at my notes here, and the old do what Debbie says. The first thing Debbie told me to do was to do my film review of the other years. And the one thing I did take out of the film review that, as the moderator, Admiral Robb always took the privilege of asking that first question for the group. So in order to maintain that tradition, I'm going to ask the first question, and then I think we have about 52 of the questions coming up here. But part of it is about what Admiral Verissimo just talked about, was speed to solving things. And so the first question is about DoD 5000, which is the overarching directive and the principles that govern the defense acquisition system. It was released in 2020. It was called the most transformational change in acquisition policy. It had 6 tenets, but I'm going to talk about 3. I'm really, and this goes to that speed piece of that, right? It's simplifying the acquisition process, tailoring the acquisition approaches, and empowering program managers. And so the question is, that's the policy that's written, and now it comes down to executing. How are we able to execute what the writing is there? So that's really what the question is. Where are we with execution of that policy? And please do not feel any pressure by the fact that the signature on the front page of DoD 5000 has to be sitting in the second row, hidden down the far side, but the Honorable Norquist when he was the Deputy Secretary of Defense. So please don't put any pressure on that. But I'll let you, and then we'll start with Young, with you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Look, everyone looks at acquisition and says it's too slow. And that precipitated the whole notion of the different pathways, right? And the rewrite of the 5000. And again, like I was saying before, the Army's actually been one of the, to include the other services, but one of the most forward-leaning in my mind using those authorities. And so when we talked about, some of these capabilities being fielded in 2 years, that's because we're able to use the mid-tier acquisition, right? And look at industry and say, hey, do you have technologies or platforms or capabilities that are mature now or that you're working on that we could stitch together to get to a prototype faster? And that has, and some of them aren't ready, but some of them are. And that has allowed us to go right into a different type of milestone, or maybe go into rapid fielding, right, beyond the rapid prototyping. And some of those capabilities has really driven us to get capabilities out there faster. Now, we've also used a lot of OTAs. We've been one of the more prolific users of the OTA. And I would say that we've been creative in the way that we use that as well. We've actually been one of the only services that are using an MTA and an embedded software pathway together. And so we are experimenting, we're working with industry, we're listening to feedback. We might not get everything right, but the authorities that was provided by Congress and the different acquisition pathways has really helped us accelerate. And again, some things are being fielded really well, but some things aren't quite as mature, and we're pushing it back into the different milestones so we can actually mature them, meaning some things aren't ready or some things are going to fail. But I think working with industry, working and having that communication that Admiral V talked about with industry and with our stakeholders are critical. And the last part of that is, like, what I would say is that going back to soldiers in the middle, we've actually incorporated more soldier touch points into the process. Not just at the testing, we're actually pulling the soldiers into the requirements phase. So they're working with our developers, whether it's software, digital capabilities, or weapons platforms, to get their feedback initially, as well as throughout the process, and not just waiting for the test. So again, I think embracing the authorities that the DoD 5000 and Congress has given us and experimenting with that has really enabled us to go a lot faster.
Anybody else want to tackle that one? We got plenty.
Just real quick, ma'am, you mentioned time is one of the critical factors, and we heard Mr. Bush and General Brito talk about the timeline based on our peer-level adversaries out there. What I tell you, the other timeline is Moore's Law. We're developing a lot of capability out there that by the time we use our acquisition protocols, if we're not using OTAs, MTAs, if we don't have the professionals that we have right now, we are just way too slow. And by the time that we spool out training capabilities to a force who did grow up to be digital natives, they're aghast at what we bought them. So we need to find ways that we go even faster with our acquisition professionals in these tools, and think about things like training as a service. You know, do we really need to buy the be-all, end-all item now, or do we buy the best of breed for 5 years right now, use it, iterate it? If it's still the best of breed in 5 years, then we reinvest in it. Otherwise, we need our defense industry folks to know we got to move much faster, and you got to show us what you got, where the best is, and let us move to that very, very quickly so that our nation can be successful.
I'll jump on that too, if only because I once again find myself in violent agreement with General Imes. Acquisition speed is obviously critical, certainly insofar as it provides us the maximum amount of time to train on the thing that we have now procured. But I think a couple things in addition to that, DoD 5000, not supposed to tackle everything, but a couple things that we definitely don't want to take our eye off the ball on. First, training while we fight in addition to training for the fight. That 5,000 isn't going to necessarily enable training while we fight. That's that mindset shift that I'll be talking about on the next, on the panel. I believe it's tomorrow. The second thing is, let's not, and this is, I guess, a little dicey thing to say at this conference, but technology isn't going to save us. People enabled by technology will save us. And so the training that this has to enable is foundational to all of this. This, DoD 5000 is tremendous for all those additional acquisition pathways to get things faster. But to General Imes' point, things that can be, best of breed, fielded, developed, used, tested, reintegrated, tweaked, the flexible, modular, open systems thing that we've been talking about. That's the goal. Speed without clearly defined requirements is just faster waste, and that's not a solution either. The other thing that this doesn't tackle is, as Admiral Verissimo said, information in the fog of war. There's a lot that's going to be happening that's going to require us to understand the battle environment that we're in during, throughout the engagement, but certainly in periods where things are non-kinetic. The mis and disinformation that clouds decision making. When am I going to use the thing that 5,000 allowed me to have faster? That's a really hard thing to understand. And the fight that we're talking about, the peer challenge, the pacing challenge, is not going to allow us a lot of time to think that through. And so again, faster kit, great. Better defined requirements, greater. Understanding when and why to use it, greater still.
I'd like to just jump in on one thing we're cautiously optimistic on. It has to do with some legislation that is teed up, and particularly this is Section 5206, which is rapid response to emerging technology advancements and threats. So if approved, and again, cautiously optimistic, but if it's approved and incorporated, this is something where the service secretaries can designate an effort to get going right away up to critical design review. And the way it's written, again, it's not approved yet, but the way it's written, it's up to $100 million in authority can be granted. And what that does is it short circuits that 2-year cycle to get on and programmed. This is an important thing, and again, if approved, I have to emphasize that, it's available to all the services. So we are cautiously optimistic about that, and that is one more lever that can be pulled in addition to mid-tier authorities, in addition to OTAs. And also, I'll just point out that those aren't also, so mid-tier and OTAs are not the panacea, they're good, right? But they're also one of many in a vast volume of tools to get stuff on contract and to ultimately get capabilities into the hands of warfighters. Thank you.
I'll just kick in real quick. So, vignette, COVID, Ukraine, and now Israel. The risk calculus of their industry, their government, and their warfighters changed in the blink of an eye. And I throw COVID in there because clearly we thought differently about using defense production to field a vaccine very quickly. The world changed and we adapted, and although it was very disruptive, we as a democracy, although very messy day to day, do very well when we all start rowing in the same direction. So that's my hope, That's my understanding. That's my faith in the Constitution. And that's where I think we can go very rapidly. How long do we take to, and this is not pointing, but how long do we take to train on a HIMARS in phase 0 where we are right now? We are at peace. How rapidly could Ukraine train on a HIMARS and employ it with some pretty good capability and precision? And we can duplicate that kind of, there's many lessons we can learn, and there's probably some lessons, wrong lessons that we think we're learning. I don't want to take too much of it, but you can really pick some opportunities when your risk calculus changes, how you manage more appropriately. I would say we are at peace. We do have 4 carriers deployed right now. We're a busy service even at peace. We keep the peace. We keep the presence. We provide deterrence in my service specifically, but we also need to be ready to surge. We need to be ready to surge more sailors, more pilots, more ships. And can technology help us be ready for that surge by mapping out our spaces, by mapping out our systems, by having good 3D models that we can then implement more rapidly and take a facility in Seattle and turn it into a fighter plant vice a people mover plant. So I think there's an opportunity to be prepared for what may come. If it comes, without spending it all on, if it never comes, it would be a waste. So deterrence and then capability to surge is, I think, a great opportunity for technology. Thanks.
Thank you. So as you look around the room here, you'll see that Itsec has a large number of our international partners and allies as part of this organization. And many of the questions I'm getting here are from some of our allied partners. And I'm just going to tie the two together. One of the successes of DoD 5000, the acquisition, is it's almost a forcing function, but the guidelines have our PMs consider our partners and allies technologies and emerging technologies, which is an important piece. So the question here that came in is, are there any policies that you see that currently hinder training in a multinational environment? I know under the JADC2, this was one of our first years that I think it was Northern Edge that actually included our coalition partners in terms of the training there, in terms of the multinational piece. But any thoughts, again, on policies or policies that are changing that will encourage more of the multinational environment training and simulation?
I can start here. I think, as a technologist, technology is the easier part. I think the TTPs on how you employ technologies are harder. And to your question about are there certain policies, I think one of the biggest policies that are a hindrance for us to work with our allies, the security classification of data and information, right? Yes, we talk about an MPE, we talk about, having a common infrastructure, a common system to be able to do that, but really just the classification, right? Whether it's Five Eyes or, secret, no foreign, those type of things. I think that's, personally for me, being a technologist, one of the things that are really prohibiting our allies and our forces to train better together. Now, we are doing a lot of workarounds to get to there, but I think, a simple policy about how do we figure out how we can share information and data with our partners in that theater is really critical to really change that and enable that training to be more realistic. Over.
Okay. Anybody else want to take that?
Yeah, General Leone, I think you hit it when you were talking about the value of our partners out there. And no one of us is as good, as strong, as lethal, or has all of the capabilities that we need to take on some of these peer-level adversaries that we have out there right now. If we're not partnering with our Five Eyes and our other regional partners out there for their niche capabilities, they're going to be critical to taking down these peer adversaries. We're going to miss the boat. We need to write for release every single time. We need data standards that let us share that data, not just across the joint force, but with the partners and allies. I got to take my hat off to the Army. Project Convergence was probably one of the most eye-opening and watershed events for us in quite some time, where not only did the Army open up how we were going to weave and close kill webs as a joint force after they had pretty much kind of shown us all how it maybe should be done, but then they opened it up to the international partners. This is how we have to get used to fighting as we move to the future. So again, more convergence and more partners and allies.
I'll say, oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
I don't want to keep, I'll get back on my soapbox, but whatever the data rights are that allows the brilliant scientists, data scientists, to integrate systems across different classifications, and that's happening right now in our LVC environment. We are integrating TS skiffed environment in with standard secret environment so that the end operators don't know where the information is coming from specifically, because they don't need to know, but the information is provided for a warfight. That is where, to me, whether it's modeling or simulation or exercises, we need to continue to have enough information so that we can have the translators, the boxes that can take highly classified and spread it out to the right warfighters at the right time. Thanks.
AJ?
Okay, we're going down and back.
I'm just trying to riff.
Yeah, that's right. I appreciate it. Thank you. So just a couple quick follow-up points. Our industry partners are essential to delivering warfighting capability into the hands of our U.S. warfighters and also partners and allies. We must continue to lower the barriers for particularly small business. And when I say small business, I also mean international small business as well, because a lot of this emerging tech we see coming in from other countries. It's vital. When you look at the arc of technology development and you start to trace back their roots to where a lot of these key technologies, and you can go across the board, you can look at autonomy, you can look at artificial intelligence, you can look at things like synthetic biology and quantum communication, and you track back where a lot of those key research areas are coming from, and some of them are not, they're not born in the United States, and that's okay, but we need to take advantage of that. So that's one quick point. It also is our core advantage to have a thriving and robust and competitive environment for doing the work that we have to do. But I'll also point out that we need to build in recompetes to some of our contracts so that it keeps everything robust. And you know, as a business person on the outside, competition is not something to be feared or shied away from. It betters the herd, and we all need that. And the last point is also, you know, we want to try and continue to bolster our outreach through on the Air Force side, things like AFWorks, AFVentures, where we are reaching out to nascent companies to help them along so we can get dual-use technologies and advanced technologies and get them guided into becoming part of DoD capability. Thanks.
Hey, could I just riff just one thing you said, since we're going all over the place now? It's been said on the panel, thievery is the best form of flattery. We are facing a strategic competitor that is hell-bent on taking whatever they can. So all of that, yes, but we have to be, so it's the balance of risk again, the caution of security versus losing an advantage through a lot of great hard work by our allies, our partners, our industry across the free world. We need to stay focused on making sure we don't slip. And then frankly, in phase 0, we need to be very careful, but if something bad were to happen, how do you turn the switch from all of this stuff being skiffed up to it's open knowledge and we got to use it tomorrow? That's something we have to be prepared for, and that's something I think this Congress or this conference can help us with. Sorry.
So Admiral, let's stay down at that end of the table and work our way this way, because that was one of the questions that's coming up here, and that in your estimation, where are the big gaps between the U.S. and the PRC in terms of technology and in terms of our training capabilities? And how do you, what do we need to do to close those gaps, or in the case where we have an advantage, to widen those gaps?
Careful.
I was going to answer the other question, but, you know. No, do you need me to buy you some time?
So, how many tons of shipbuilding, what's the size, the total capacity of, and so that's, I'm a maritime officer, I'm a global force for good. They have speed. And Jeff Bezos, when asked, hey, you know, when you were young and you first started this company, you were agile. Now you're massive. What does that mean for you? It's like, well, I sleep a lot better now that I'm massive, but you know, the agility is its own unique capability. They're demonstrating both some pretty good mass and acceleration, and whether it's just through thievery or we'll have to figure out whether they have their own innovative culture developing, they have some rapid capability development. We need to keep an eye on it. We clearly see differences in focus on areas that we have not specifically focused, rockets, single-use items. We tend to be more of the efficiency of long-term use. As a practitioner of air-breathing assets, they sure would be handy. You can look at Ukraine and Israel, you know, tunnels and bulwarks. If you don't have overhead aviation, or if you do have overhead aviation, it gets really hard to operate freely. So where do we take these two different frames of reference on how we fight, and that we impose cost on their model while disallowing them to impose continued cost on ours? It's a wicked hard problem and a great question. We are bigger, better, but right now, I'll just give you one of my other buzzwords. For 50 years, we've been faster than the Russian POM process. We are not faster than the PRC POM process. So we need to start making some changes.
I'm going to give you a short answer. 3 areas. STEM graduates. It's orders of magnitude different in China than it is in the United States. Orders of magnitude. And graduating STEM is super important to continue to develop these high-tech solutions and these exquisite technologies, but even the low-tech solutions, we need them. Artificial intelligence. It's been said that AI curriculum in China begins at kindergarten with 27 courses. I can't give you a source on that, but I have heard that at least 2 different times, and I believe it to be true. And then I'll go back to something that Dr. Griffin, who was our prior Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering back in 2018, 2019 timeframe, said with respect to hypersonics. At the time, he said openly that the data he reviewed indicated that the Chinese have out-tested the United States 20-1 in terms of hypersonics. That was 5 years ago, 5+. These are 3 areas of where we need to stay focused and continue to keep the foot on the gas.
I would also say replace China with the word Russia. High-end technology in the battle space, probably one of the world's premier, integrated air defenses, frontline armor, and then absolutely decimated by the Ukrainians. Why? Because they didn't follow one of the principles that's why we're here today. They didn't train. Like General Brito said, if we're going to develop new tech and new capabilities and new pieces of kit, you have to have a .NO PF process. You have to have a parallel in training that develops in stride with the new piece of kit. Otherwise, you're just absolutely going to fail. And I think the Russians proved that in spades in the face of the Ukrainians. I'd also say against the Chinese, as much as they're developing a lot of tech out there, are they integrating it as well as we are? We're bringing in partners and allies who have these capabilities that maybe not everybody across the domain has. So when you bring that together, we do get a unified effect, a unity of effort that nobody else has.
All right, I'm going to jump in. So I think there's a way to think about this in terms of positive gaps and negative gaps. So positive gaps where we have the advantage of the gap itself. And the first one that comes to mind is our NCO Corps, where we have people who are extremely agile and able to think things through. That is an unbelievable strategic advantage that we have over the acute challenge and the pacing challenge. The second is, as General Imes mentioned, our training and education discipline, where we bake that in very early on. I think those are two strong positive gaps. Negative gaps, and this is outside of the kind of ones and zeros of the technology that we're talking about, but it's just China's ability to manage their geographic region. Because, and this is a really dumb point, but they're literally there, and they've been there for a really long time, and we have not. So their ability to make and manage and refine and prune those relationships, that kind of sets the diplomatic and maneuver conditions for us when we're trying to create relationships of our own, going back to allies and partners. We've got 5 treaty allies in that region, that's phenomenal. But it is not Europe. There's no collective security agreement. This is kind of individual relationships that a lot of the time sort of sets the conditions for how we're going to operate and maneuver. And they all have their own perceptions of the threat that can change depending on the government at the time. The second thing, of course, is the convenience of a command economy. As AJ mentioned, they are able to generate an enormous capacity of people that have the skills and training and education to be STEM graduates. But my concern from the overarching perspective, I guess, of the question itself is when we assess our gaps, let's not out-China China. Let's not mirror them. Let's not then let the solution be becoming, my 3.5-year-old, who's very smart but also gets stuck inside his own t-shirt, should not be then pushed into a kindergarten where he's going to take 27 classes on STEM. I also want him to learn painting and other things like putting on his clothes. And all of that is really important, and that's the American way of war. That is what makes our country our country. So as we assess our gaps, just let's take a little bit of an appetite suppressant such that the solution does not then shoot ourselves in the foot and we lose what gives us our own strategic advantage in the region around which we are competing.
Yeah, I'm just going to add a couple more things. I'm going to hit on a couple areas that some of our panelists said, but yeah, China is kicking our butt in computer vision, right? They have no privacy laws. They've been doing that and operationalizing that for decades. But we're better in transformations and language models, whether it's large or small, right? So if you talk about AI in certain dimensions, they may be, but I think we are also ahead in some of the other areas. But I will say that they're very good at getting to the data, right? We have to protect it, getting to the research, the basic research, and then operationalizing it. So while we may have more published, right, they are very good at operationalizing that. But again, there are different areas that I think we can leverage from an AI perspective. Data, they have a different approach on data. They lock down all of their data. We kind of open it. But I think that also helps us because the other thing that China has an advantage on us is volume, just volume of everything and people. But our number one advantage, Caroline talked about it, is our people. If you saw my slide earlier, it talked about people are our number one asymmetric advantage, our NCO Corps and our training. And so what I say back to the whole data side of things is that a lot of that information is out there, but our innovative people, our asymmetric advantage helps us overcome that. And the other portion of that is, again, I think you already touched on it, AJ, is hypersonics. They're ahead of us on the hypersonics, but we are doing things between the Navy and us on the hypersonic side so we can actually catch up to them and leapfrog them. So I would say that from a race perspective, there are some gaps that we have that they might have an advantage. But again, I think we have other areas that we have an advantage on. And again, I want to go back to the innovation, disrupting the status quo, and our people are number one asymmetric advantage.
So we have 26 questions left, and we're out of time. What I have done is I've separated the questions for each of our presenters. I know Young has got 3 more. I think he has 1 today, 2 tomorrow. And some of these are actually very appropriate for some of the follow-on presentations we're doing. But with that, thank you again for joining us. And let's hear it for our senior leaders one more time.